The last person I expected at my doorstep at 2 a.m. was Vanessa Morgan, mascara streaming down her face, trembling in a torn designer dress with a fresh bruise forming beneath her right eye. This was my husband's mistress, the woman who had been sleeping with him for the past year, whose perfume still clung to his shirts, whose text messages I'd discovered 3 months ago but never confronted him about. Now standing before me, terrified and desperate, silently pleading for help. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this moment. What my husband didn't know was that by sunrise, the empire he'd built on secrets and lies would crumble beneath his feet. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, 42 years old, Chief Financial Analyst at Meridian Consulting, and, for the last 17 years, wife to Dr. Nathan Blackwood, the celebrated neurologist whose revolutionary surgical techniques had made him both wealthy and revered throughout the medical community of Seattle. Our life looked perfect from the outside. The elegant Victorian home in Queen Anne Hill with its sweeping view of Puget Sound, the charity galas where Nathan was invariably asked to speak, the summer home on Orcas Island, the carefully cultivated image of the power couple who had it, all success, respect, and a seemingly unshakable partnership. What people didn't see were the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way his eyes never quite met mine anymore when he said, "I love you." The gradual emotional withdrawal that had turned our marriage into a carefully choreographed performance. "You better come inside," I told Vanessa, stepping back from the door, noting how she glanced nervously over her shoulder as if expecting Nathan to materialize from the darkness. Rain had begun to fall, casting halos around the streetlights and drumming steadily against the roof of our home. I led her through to the kitchen, not the living room with its carefully arranged family photos that created the illusion of happiness. The kitchen was neutral territory, clinical, practical, like the mindset I'd adopted over the past few months. "He doesn't know I'm here," Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper as she sank into a chair at the island countertop. "If he finds out," she trailed off, her manicured fingers tracing the edge of a bruise on her wrist that her bracelet couldn't quite hide. "Nathan isn't home," I replied, filling the electric kettle. "Hospital emergency. Won't be back until morning." I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. The same voice I used when presenting financial projections to clients who were facing uncomfortable truths about their businesses. Tea seemed inadequate for the situation, but it gave me something to do with my hands. Something normal to cling to in this surreal moment where my husband's mistress sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m., seeking refuge from the man we had both loved. "How long have you known?" Vanessa asked, watching me with red-rimmed eyes as I placed a steaming mug in front of her. "About the affair? 3 months? 2 weeks? 4 days?" I sat across from her, noting the flicker of surprise that crossed her face. "About who Nathan really is? I'm still figuring that out. But I think you're here to fill in some of those blanks. Grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly in the silence that followed, each second punctuating the strange limbo we found ourselves in. 2 women connected by the same man, now united by fear. "I thought he loved me," Vanessa finally said, her voice breaking. "He promised we would be together, that once his research was complete and the patents secured, he would leave you, start fresh." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. I was so stupid. I didn't contradict her. Nathan had always been persuasive. It was what made him an effective department head, a sought-after speaker, and a surgeon whose patients trusted him implicitly. That same charisma had once made me believe I was the luckiest woman alive when he chose me. "When did he start hitting you?" I asked, the directness of my question making her flinch. 2 months ago, after I questioned some irregularities I found in the research data." She took a shaky breath. "It was just once at first. He was immediately remorseful. Flowers, jewelry, promises it would never happen again. A bitter laugh escaped her. Classic, right? I should have known better. I'm a psychologist, for God's sake. That explained how they met. Nathan's groundbreaking work on neural pathways in trauma patients would have intersected with her field. The renowned neurologist and the brilliant psychologist, collaborating professionally before crossing into personal territory. What irregularities in the research? I pressed, feeling a cold certainty settling in my stomach. This was it, the missing piece I'd been searching for. Vanessa's eyes darted to the windows, checking that the curtains were drawn before she leaned forward. The patient outcomes. They're fabricated, Eleanor. At least some of them. Her voice dropped even lower. The miracle recovery that secured his federal grants? The data that's about to make Blackwood Neural Therapeutics worth billions once it goes public next month? It's built on manipulated results. The revelation should have shocked me. Instead, it was like having the final piece of a puzzle click into place. The unexplained finances I'd discovered while meticulously going through our accounts, the offshore transfers, the shell companies, the patients whose families had reached out to me with confused questions about consent forms they supposedly signed but had no memory of. How many people know? I asked. Just Dr. Patel. He's the research assistant who first noticed the discrepancies. And now me. Her hand trembled as she raised the mug to her lips. Nathan thinks he convinced us both to stay quiet, threatened our careers, our reputations. She set the mug down, some of the tea sloshing over the side. But tonight, when I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. The word hung in the air between us. Pregnant. An unexpected variable in an already complicated equation. He completely transformed, Vanessa continued, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat abdomen. Cold, calculating, said a child would complicate everything, that I needed to take care of it immediately. When I refused, she gestured to her bruised face. This wasn't just a moment of anger, Eleanor. He was methodical. And afterward, I heard him on the phone, talking about eliminating the problem and making it look like an accident. The clinical detachment I'd been maintaining began to crack. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This wasn't even just about fraud. What Vanessa was describing was something far darker, a man capable of orchestrating violence to protect his secrets. Why come to me? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Why not go to the police? With what evidence? My word against one of the most respected doctors in the country? The bruises? She shook her head. Nathan would say I'm an unstable ex-lover making false accusations, that I threatened to destroy his marriage and career when he tried to end things. She looked at me directly. But you're different. You're his wife. You have access. And from the way you're reacting to all this, I'm guessing you've already been putting the pieces together. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked street. The neighborhood was quiet, houses dark except for the occasional porch light, peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing inside these walls. 3 months ago, I began, I found texts on Nathan's phone. Not exactly original, I know, but what caught my attention wasn't the affair itself. It was what the discovery led me to notice. Suddenly, all the little inconsistencies I'd been ignoring for years came into focus. The unexplained absences that didn't align with hospital schedules. The financial discrepancies that went beyond what even a successful surgeon should be earning. I turned back to Vanessa. Did you know Nathan maintains a separate apartment downtown, under a different name? She shook her head, looking genuinely surprised. I followed him there 2 weeks ago. He met with men I didn't recognize, men who didn't look like doctors or researchers or pharmaceutical executives. I returned to the island, pulling my laptop from where I'd left it earlier that evening. I've been documenting everything, the finances, the meetings, the patients whose families have contacted me with concerns. I opened a folder containing carefully organized files, bank statements, photographs, recorded conversations. Months of meticulous investigation conducted while maintaining the facade of the devoted, oblivious wife. But I've been missing the crucial link, I admitted. The why behind it all. The falsified research explains everything. I looked up at her. Do you have proof? Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Dr. Patel gave me this before he resigned. Last week. It contains the original data sets compared with what was submitted for publication and to the grant committees. She placed it on the counter between us. Nathan doesn't know I have it. I picked up the drive, this small object that could destroy the career and reputation Nathan had built over decades, the evidence that could potentially send him to prison, the validation of every suspicion I'd been harboring. What do you need from me? I asked, though I already knew what had to be done. Protection, and help expose him before he can hurt anyone else. Vanessa's composure was returning now that she'd shared her burden. The professional psychologist emerging from beneath the frightened Mistress. There are patients with traumatic brain injuries in clinical trials right now, receiving treatments based on falsified data, people who think they're being helped when they might actually be at risk. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The weight of her words settled over the kitchen. This wasn't just about Nathan's betrayal of our marriage vows, or even the academic fraud. There were vulnerable patients involved. Lives are at stake. You need to understand what we're up against, I said, closing my laptop. Nathan has connections everywhere. Hospital administration, the medical board, local politics, even law enforcement. I thought of Police Commissioner Davis, whose daughter's experimental treatment had been personally overseen by Nathan. If we're going to do this, we need to be strategic, thorough. We don't have much time, Vanessa countered. The company goes public in 4 weeks. Once that happens, there will be shareholders to protect, even more powerful interests involved. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times, marking the deepening of the night and the strange alliance forming in my kitchen. I need to show you something, I said, making a decision. I led Vanessa upstairs to my home office, the one room in the house that was exclusively mine, the space Nathan rarely entered. The wall opposite my desk, normally covered by an abstract painting, was now exposed. In its place was what could only be described as an investigation board. Photographs connected by colored strings, financial documents, timeline charts, patient names with question marks beside them. Vanessa stared at it, her eyes widening. How long have you been building this? Since I found the texts, I replied, crossing to my desk and unlocking the bottom drawer with a key I kept on a chain around my neck. But that was just the catalyst. I think, subconsciously, I've known something was wrong for much longer. I removed a thick file and handed it to her. These are copies of financial transfers dating back 3 years. Money moving through a series of shell companies, eventually landing in accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Vanessa flipped through the pages, her professional demeanor now fully restored as she processed the information. This is methodical. Nathan always said you were brilliant with numbers, but this is something else entirely. I'm a financial analyst. Following money trails is what I do. I pointed to a section of the wall where patient names were clustered. What I couldn't figure out was the connection to these patients. They all received experimental treatments from Nathan, but their outcomes seemed random. Some improved dramatically, others showed no change. A few got worse. It wasn't random, Vanessa said, approaching the wall and studying the names. The miraculous recoveries, those are the ones whose data was manipulated, the ones used to secure additional funding and media attention. She pointed to a specific group. These patients here, the ones with asterisks by their names, they all have something else in common. What? They're all part of the clinical trial being funded by Helix Pharmaceuticals, the company that's planning to acquire Blackwood Neural Therapeutics once it goes public. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. So the falsified data isn't just about academic recognition or grant money, I said slowly. It's about driving up the company's value before acquisition. Exactly. We're talking potential securities fraud on top of everything else. Vanessa sank into the chair opposite, my desk suddenly looking exhausted. Nathan always claimed the ends justified the means, that his work would eventually help people, even if corners had to be cut along the way. And you believed him, I said, not unkindly. I wanted to, she admitted. Just like I wanted to believe he loved me, that I was special, not just... She trailed off. Not just another woman he was using? I finished for her. Nathan has always been skilled at finding people's vulnerabilities, their pressure points. I gestured to the investigation board. Look at how many people are connected to this. Researchers, hospital administrators, even patients' families. All manipulated in different ways to serve his needs. A notification chimed on my phone, a security alert from the system I'd had, discreetly installed throughout the house. I picked it up, checking the app. What is it? Vanessa asked, noticing my expression change. Movement detected at the gate, I said, showing her the screen where a car could be seen approaching our driveway. Nathan's home early. Panic flashed across Vanessa's face. He can't find me here. He won't, I assured her, already moving to lock my office door. I crossed to the opposite wall and pressed on what appeared to be a solid oak panel. It slid open, revealing a small room beyond, originally a Victorian-era servants' quarters, now converted into a secure space with basic amenities. Wait here. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Vanessa hesitated only briefly before stepping into the hidden room, clutching her purse with the precious USB drive still inside. What are you going to do? I checked my watch. 3:17 a.m. Far too early for Nathan's supposed emergency surgery to be complete. He hadn't planned on coming home tonight, which meant something had changed his plans. I'm going to find out why he's really here, I said, handing her a tablet from my desk. This connects to the house's security system. You'll be able to see and hear everything. Before closing the panel, I met her eyes one last time. Vanessa, no matter what happens, stay hidden until I come for you. If I don't return by dawn, there's an envelope taped beneath the bottom drawer of that cabinet. It contains everything you'll need: cash, a burner phone, contact information for someone who can help you disappear. The sound of a car door slamming echoed from outside. Time was up. You've been planning for this, Vanessa realized, her voice a mixture of surprise and something like respect. Not for this exactly, I admitted as I slid the panel closed. But I've learned to prepare for contingencies. I quickly locked my office door from the inside, then crossed to the window that overlooked the driveway. Nathan was approaching the front door, moving with the purposeful stride that had always commanded respect in hospital corridors. He was alone, at least. The security system chimed softly as the front door opened. I took a deep breath, schooling my features into the expression of a wife surprised by her husband's early return. The same mask I'd worn for months while conducting my private investigation. As I descended the stairs to greet him, I reminded myself that tonight was just the beginning. The real challenge would come with what we did next, how we used the evidence Vanessa had brought to dismantle Nathan's carefully constructed world without being destroyed in the process. Nathan? I called out, feigning sleepiness as I reached the bottom of the stairs. I thought you were at the hospital all night. Is everything okay? He turned toward me, and in the dim light of the foyer, I caught something in his expression I'd never seen before, a fleeting but unmistakable flash of calculation. Not the warm smile of a husband returning home, not even the distracted acknowledgement of recent months. This was something colder, more deliberate, and I realized with perfect clarity that whatever Nathan had done tonight, wherever he'd actually been, it had changed things irrevocably. The game we'd been playing, he believing he was the only one with secrets, me quietly gathering evidence, had entered a new and dangerous phase. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, his voice perfectly controlled as he set down his briefcase. "We need to talk." Nathan's presence filled our foyer as he shrugged off his coat, the fabric still damp from the rain. Even disheveled at this hour, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms, making life-or-death decisions, and never having his authority questioned. In the 17 years of our marriage, that confidence had been the foundation of his success, and the perfect cover for whatever was truly happening beneath the surface. "You're up late," he observed, his voice casual as he hung his coat in the closet with practiced precision. "Trouble sleeping?" I crossed my arms, maintaining the performance of a mildly concerned spouse. "I was just going over some reports for tomorrow's meeting, lost track of time." The half-truth came easily. I had indeed been reviewing reports, though not the kind Meridian Consulting would care about. "What happened at the hospital? I thought you'd be in surgery until morning." Nathan moved past me toward the kitchen, his hand briefly touching my shoulder in a gesture that once would have felt intimate but now seemed mechanical. The patient wasn't stable enough. We had to postpone it. He paused at the entrance to the kitchen, surveying the room with a quick, clinical glance. "You made tea?" 2 mugs sat on the island countertop, mine and Vanessa's, the latter still half full and faintly stained with her lipstick. A rookie mistake. I'd been too distracted by the security alert to clear away the evidence of my visitor. "I couldn't sleep," I said smoothly, moving to collect the mugs. "First cup didn't do the trick, so I made another." Nathan's eyes followed my movements, and I could almost see the calculations happening behind them. Assessing, evaluating, looking for inconsistencies in my behavior. That gaze had intimidated board members, residents, and competing researchers. But I'd spent months preparing for this moment, studying him while being studied. "You seem tense," he noted, loosening his tie. "Everything all right at work?" "Fine. Just a stressful quarter." I rinsed the mugs, my back to him. "The Matthews account is proving more complicated than anticipated." There was no Matthews account. It was a test, one of many small fabrications I'd introduced in recent months, to assess how closely Nathan was monitoring my professional life. His lack of reaction confirmed he wasn't. "I need a drink," he announced, moving toward the liquor cabinet in the adjoining dining room. "Join me?" It wasn't really a question. Nathan poured 2 fingers of his preferred scotch, the 18-year Macallan, reserved for what he deemed significant occasions. Whatever had brought him home tonight warranted celebration in his mind. Accepted the glass he offered, taking the smallest possible sip. "What did you want to talk about?" Nathan settled into his usual chair at the head of our dining table, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I've been giving considerable thought to our future, Eleanor." The statement hung in the air between us, loaded with possible meanings. From upstairs, I knew Vanessa would be watching this exchange on the tablet, possibly interpreting his words as confirmation of his plans to leave me for her, at least before tonight's events had changed the equation. "Our future," I echoed, keeping my expression neutral. "That sounds serious." "It is." He took a deliberate sip of his scotch. "The company goes public in 4 weeks. The valuation projections are exceeding even our most optimistic models. Once the Helix acquisition is complete, our lives will change dramatically." I nodded slowly, as if this were the first time I was hearing details about Blackwood Neural Therapeutics' financial prospects. "How dramatically?" "We're looking at a personal payout of approximately $47 million. The number slid off his tongue with practiced casualness, but his eyes tracked my reaction carefully. "After taxes, of course. If I hadn't already discovered the offshore accounts, this figure might have shocked me. Instead, I calibrated my response to show appropriate surprise without overplaying it. "That's substantial. More than you initially projected. Recent developments have accelerated our timeline and increased investor confidence." Nathan leaned forward slightly. But with this level of success comes increased scrutiny. The SEC, medical ethics boards, competitors looking for weaknesses, they'll all be watching closely. I recognized the warning beneath his words. Nathan wasn't just telling me about a windfall. He was preparing me for something else. Something that required my cooperation, or at least my silence. I understand, I said carefully. Success always brings its challenges. Indeed. He finished his scotch and set the glass down with deliberate precision. That's why I've decided we should take a step back from public life for a while after the acquisition. Perhaps that extended sabbatical we've discussed. The villa in Tuscany is available for a 6-month lease. We had never discussed a sabbatical or a villa in Tuscany. This was new territory. Nathan creating a narrative for a future that didn't exist, at least not one that included both of us. 6 months in Italy sounds lovely, I replied, playing along. But what about your patients? The clinical trials? I thought the post-acquisition period would be your busiest time. A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed his features before the controlled mask returned. The research team can manage without my direct supervision for a few months. Dr. Levinson is more than capable of overseeing the trials. Dr. Levinson, the same colleague who'd raised ethical concerns about Nathan's methodology 3 years ago, only to be relegated to administrative duties shortly after. The same doctor who'd recently been granted a surprising promotion back to clinical oversight. Another piece connecting in my mental map of Nathan's manipulations. This seems sudden, I observed, testing the boundaries of his fabrication. Last week you were talking about expanding the trials to include pediatric cases. Nathan's expression hardened slightly. Plans change, Eleanor. The opportunity arose, and I made an executive decision. He stood, moving to refill his glass. The point is, we need to prepare for a transition, starting immediately. Immediately? I've already instructed our accountant to begin liquidating certain assets. The Orcas Island property, your mother's art collection, the investment portfolio you inherited from your father. He spoke without looking at me, as if these were minor details not worthy of eye contact. We'll need liquid capital for the transition. My pulse quickened. The assets he'd mentioned were exclusively mine, properties and investments I'd inherited. Or purchased with my own money, kept deliberately separate from our joint finances. Assets I'd secretly secured months ago when I first became suspicious. Nathan, I said, tempering my voice to show confusion rather than alarm. Those are my personal holdings. Why would we need to liquidate them? Especially with such a significant payout coming from the company. He turned, studying me with that clinical detachment I'd grown to recognize as dangerous. Because, Eleanor, these next few weeks require absolute financial flexibility. The accounts we've established need to be funded immediately. What accounts? I asked, though I knew exactly which offshore structures he was referring to. Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry about the details. Thompson will handle everything. You'll just need to sign the authorization forms I've left in my briefcase. Thompson, the financial advisor Nathan had introduced last year, whose credentials I'd later discovered were fabricated. The man who'd been instrumental in setting up the labyrinthine network of shell companies I'd spent months mapping. I took another small sip of scotch, using the moment to organize my thoughts. Nathan was accelerating whatever endgame he'd been planning. The question was why and how it connected to what had happened with Vanessa earlier tonight. I'd like to understand the strategy better before signing anything, I said, careful to frame it as interest rather than resistance. After all, if we're talking about my inheritance, I should at least know where it's going. A shadow passed over Nathan's features, brief but unmistakable irritation at being questioned. It's quite technical, Eleanor. The regulatory framework around biotech IPOs requires certain protective measures. He waved his hand dismissively. Thompson can explain the details if you're genuinely interested, but it's hardly worth your concern at this hour. There it was, the subtle dismissal, the implication that financial matters were beyond my comprehension. For years, this tactic had worked, allowing him to manage our finances with minimal oversight. It was only after discovering the affair that I'd begun examining our accounts with the same analytical precision I applied to my clients' portfolios. "Actually," I said, setting down my barely touched scotch, "I've been doing some reading on biotech valuations recently. Fascinating field. The metrics used to assess pre-revenue companies are quite different from traditional market sectors." I watched his expression carefully. "Did you know that data integrity represents nearly 40% of valuation weight in pharmaceutical acquisitions? That's substantially higher than any other industry." Nathan's hand tightened fractionally around his glass. "I wasn't aware you'd developed such an interest in my field." "Not your medical field," I corrected gently. "The financial aspects. After all, it's what I do for a living. Analyze financial structures, identify patterns, follow money trails." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half-hour, its resonant tones filling the silence that had settled between us. From somewhere upstairs, I imagined Vanessa watching this exchange with growing tension, perhaps understanding for the first time the dangerous game being played in this house. Nathan set his glass down and leaned forward, his demeanor shifting, subtly. The dismissive husband disappeared, replaced by the calculating personality I'd glimpsed in the foyer. "Eleanor, I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His voice had dropped to a lower register. "Has anyone contacted you recently? About me, about the company, about our finances?" My mind raced through possible responses, calculating risks and advantages. Did he somehow know about Vanessa's visit? Or was he referring to someone else? Perhaps Dr. Patel or one of the patient's families who had reached out to me. "That's an odd question," I deflected, buying time. "What kind of contact are you referring to?" "Colleagues, journalists, regulatory officials." His eyes never left mine. "Anyone asking questions they shouldn't be asking." I thought of the business card in my desk drawer upstairs, given to me by Special Agent Harrington of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division 3 weeks ago during what had appeared to be a chance encounter at a coffee shop. "I think I'd remember being approached by federal agents, Nathan." His eyes narrowed at my specific mention of federal authorities, a calculated risk on my part, testing his reaction. "I didn't mention federal agents, Eleanor. You said regulatory? Officials. In biotech, that typically means the FDA or SEC. I shrugged lightly. "I'm just being precise." Nathan studied me for a long moment before his expression relaxed into something approximating warmth. "Of course, your attention to detail is one of your many strengths." He stood, seemingly satisfied with whatever assessment he'd made of my loyalty. "It's late. We should continue this conversation tomorrow when we're both fresh. The authorization forms can wait until morning." The sudden de-escalation caught me off guard. Nathan was retreating, postponing whatever he'd come home to accomplish. Why? As he moved past me toward the stairs, he paused, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder. "I know I've been distracted lately, absent, both physically and emotionally." His thumb traced a small circle at the base of my neck, a gesture of intimacy that now felt alien and calculating. "Once this acquisition is complete, things will be different. Better. I promise." I forced myself to reach up and cover his hand with mine, completing the performance of a wife who still believed in her husband's promises. "I'd like that." Nathan smiled, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the man I'd married. Or perhaps just the mask he'd worn so successfully for so many years. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's an important day." "Important how?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "You'll see," he replied cryptically, already moving toward the stairs. "Everything's about to change, Eleanor, for the better." I remained seated as he ascended to the second floor, listening to the familiar creaks of the staircase, the sound of our bedroom door opening and closing. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding, my hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline of the encounter began to subside. Whatever game Nathan was playing had rules I didn't fully understand yet. The sudden rush to liquidate my assets, the mention of protective measures for the IPO, the veiled inquiries about outside contact, all pointed to a man preparing for some dramatic action. And given what Vanessa had shared about his reaction to her pregnancy, I couldn't afford to underestimate how dangerous that action might be. I waited 15 minutes, watching the security camera feed on my phone to confirm that Nathan had settled into our bedroom. Then I quietly made my way upstairs, avoiding the steps that creaked, moving through the darkened house with practiced stealth. Instead of turning toward the master suite, I continued to my office, unlocking the door with keys I kept in a hidden pocket of my robe. Inside, the investigation board seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the windows. I slid open the hidden panel, finding Vanessa sitting exactly where I'd left her, the tablet clutched in her hands, her face pale in its blue glow. "He doesn't know I'm here," she whispered as I stepped into the small room, sliding the panel closed behind me. "No," I confirmed, "but he knows something. He came home specifically to have me sign authorization forms that would liquidate my personal assets I quietly secured months ago." I sank onto the small chair opposite her. "Whatever he's planning, he's accelerating the timeline." "It's because of me," Vanessa said, her voice thick with fear. "Because I refuse to terminate the pregnancy, because he thinks I might expose the falsified data. Perhaps." I studied her in the dim light. "Or it could be something else entirely. The company goes public in 4 weeks, but Nathan mentioned a personal payout of $47 million. That's substantially higher than what the prospectus indicated when I last reviewed it." Vanessa's brow furrowed. "The valuation increased? How?" "That's what we need to find out." I gestured to the USB drive in her purse. "I need to see exactly what's on that drive. Not just the falsified data, but any communications, any evidence of who else might be involved." She handed me the drive without hesitation. Dr. Patel organized everything meticulously. There are folders for each patient in the trial, comparing original scans and test results with what was submitted for publication. There's also a directory of email correspondences, mostly between Nathan and various researchers, but some with pharmaceutical executives as well. I slipped the drive into my pocket. "I have a secure laptop in here that isn't connected to our home network. We can review everything safely." I paused, considering our next steps. "But first, we need to understand what Nathan's planning for tomorrow. He said it was important, and that everything's about to change." A thought struck me, and I pulled out my phone, checking the calendar I'd created to track Nathan's professional and social obligations. "The press conference," I murmured, finding the entry. "Blackwood Neural Therapeutics is hosting a major press event tomorrow at the Rainier Medical Center. Nathan's announcing the expansion of the clinical trials and releasing preliminary results to analysts. That's why he's rushing to secure funds," Vanessa realized. "Once those preliminary results are public, the stock will be effectively priced for the IPO. If there are any inconsistencies in the data, any questions about methodology, the entire house of cards could collapse," I finished for her. "And apparently, Nathan's planning for us to disappear to Tuscany immediately after the acquisition is complete. A convenient way to be unavailable for questioning when inconsistencies inevitably emerge." Vanessa's hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. "And a convenient opportunity for accidents to happen to those who know too much." The implications hung heavy in the small room. We were no longer just dealing with a philandering husband or academic fraud. The stakes had escalated to potential financial crimes worth millions and threats to human life, both Vanessa's and possibly mine as well. "We need to move quickly," I said, making a decision. "Nathan will be up at 6 for his morning run. That gives us just over 2 hours to review the data, formulate a plan, and make arrangements for your safety. What about you? Vanessa asked. He's your husband. If he discovers you're working against him. I thought of the man downstairs, not the charming neurologist who'd won my heart 17 years ago, but the calculated stranger I'd glimpsed tonight. A man willing to falsify medical data, manipulate vulnerable patients, and threaten the mother of his unborn child. Nathan stopped being my husband the moment he decided our marriage was just another asset to leverage, I said quietly. Now he's just another financial criminal I need to analyze and expose. I withdrew a small laptop from a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards and powered it on, the screen casting our faces in a pale blue glow. As it booted up, I turned to Vanessa with one final question, the one that would determine exactly how we proceeded. Before we go further, I need to know something. The patients in Nathan's trials? How much danger are they actually in from these experimental treatments? Vanessa's expression grew grave. The treatment protocol itself isn't necessarily dangerous. It's a modified neural stimulation technique that has shown some promise in legitimate studies. She leaned closer, lowering her voice despite our isolation. But Nathan's been systematically increasing dosages beyond approved levels to manufacture. Breakthrough results. The most vulnerable patients, those with severe traumatic brain injuries, are at significant risk of seizures, cognitive decline, even stroke. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. How many patients are currently receiving this treatment? 27. In the active trial group, 8 of them are children. Vanessa's voice broke slightly. That's what I confronted him about tonight. He's planning to include another dozen pediatric patients starting next week, and the dosage protocol he's established exceeds what's been safely tested by nearly 40%. The thought of children being put at risk, deliberately endangered for financial gain, crystallized everything. This wasn't just about Nathan's betrayal of me, or even his threats against Vanessa. This was about stopping a dangerous fraud before more vulnerable patients suffered. We have until 6 a.m., I said, inserting the USB drive into the laptop. Let's make every minute count. For the next hour, we pored over the contents of Dr. Patel's drive. The evidence was methodically organized, damning in its comprehensiveness. Patient files showing original brain scans alongside doctored versions. Email threads discussing how to adjust test results to show more dramatic improvements. Financial projections that correlated increased success rates with higher valuation metrics. Most disturbing were the risk assessment documents, internal. Analyses that clearly identified the dangers of the elevated treatment protocols, but dismissed them as acceptable collateral considerations given the transformative market potential. This goes beyond Nathan, I said, scrolling through a particularly incriminating email chain. Dr. Levinson, the hospital's ethics committee chair, the chief administrator, they're all implicated to varying degrees. Vanessa nodded grimly. Blackwood, Neural Therapeutics has promised significant endowments to the neurology department and a new pediatric wing. A lot of people are invested in its success, regardless of the methods. I found myself mentally categorizing the evidence, organizing it into the investigative framework I used for complex financial fraud cases. We need to focus on 3 distinct avenues: patient safety, academic fraud, and securities violations. The SEC would be interested in the securities angle, Vanessa observed, especially with the IPO imminent, and the FDA would be concerned. About patient safety and clinical trial violations, I added, thinking aloud. But both agencies move slowly. By the time they build a case, those children could already be receiving dangerous treatments. I pulled out my phone, staring at it thoughtfully. The business card from Special Agent Harrington was upstairs in my desk, but I'd memorized the number weeks ago, just in case. The question was whether to make that call now, with Nathan just down the hall, or wait until we could ensure Vanessa's safety. There's something else you should see, Vanessa said softly, navigating to a folder I hadn't yet examined. She opened a file labeled Contingencies and turned the screen toward me. It contained what could only be described as an exit strategy: detailed plans for transferring funds through untraceable channels, documentation for multiple identities, property holdings in countries without extradition treaties, and most chillingly, a section titled Liability Elimination that included medical protocols disguised as treatments but designed to induce fatal complications in compromised subjects. Next to this section was a list of names. Dr. Patel was at the top, marked with a red X. Vanessa's name appeared third on the list. Mine was second. He was never planning to take either of us to Tuscany, I said, my voice sounding distant even, to my own ears. This is a murder plan, Vanessa finished, her hand protective over her abdomen, disguised as medical care. I closed the laptop. My decision was made. We need to get you somewhere safe immediately. Then I'm contacting the FBI. We can't just leave, Vanessa protested. The press conference is tomorrow. If he announces the expanded pediatric trials. He won't, I said with newfound resolve. Because neither of us will be playing defense anymore. I returned to the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards and removed a second, smaller lockbox. Inside were items I'd gathered over the months of my investigation: backup copies of incriminating documents, a burner phone, emergency cash, and a small recording device. Here's what we're going to do, I said, laying out each item between us. First, you're leaving this house, but not to hide. You're going to meet with Special Agent Harrington at the FBI field office downtown. I'll arrange it using this burner phone. Vanessa looked uncertain. And you? I'm staying, I replied, holding up the recording device. Nathan thinks I know nothing. Tomorrow morning, over breakfast, I'm going to play the concerned, supportive wife who's curious about his big announcement. With what we now know, I can ask exactly the right questions to get him talking about the modified treatment protocols, the manipulated data, all of it. That's incredibly dangerous, Eleanor. If he suspects, he won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. Nathan believes in his own superiority too much to imagine I could be a threat. That blind spot is our advantage. I checked the time, 4:35 a.m. Still dark outside, but dawn would break soon. Nathan's morning run would begin precisely at 6 AIG. His dedication to routine was something I was counting on. Once you're safely with the FBI, sharing everything from the USB drive, I'll get Nathan's recorded confession. Between the documentation and his own words, they'll have enough to stop the press conference and protect those children. I began gathering what Vanessa would need for her journey. The timing has to be perfect. Nathan can't suspect you've been here. And he can't know I'm working with federal authorities until it's too late for him to activate his contingency plans. Vanessa watched me work, her psychologist's gaze assessing not just my plan, but my psychological state. You've been preparing for something like this for months, haven't you? I paused, considering her question. Had I known on some level that this moment would come? That the man I married was capable of not just infidelity but calculated harm? I think I've been preparing ever since I found those text messages, I admitted. Not consciously, not with a specific outcome in mind. But something fundamental changed that day. Not just in how I saw Nathan, but in how I saw myself. No longer just his wife, but someone with the skills and determination to uncover the truth, whatever it might be. Vanessa nodded, understanding, in her eyes. The moment you stopped being a participant in his narrative and started writing your own. Exactly. I handed her a small bag containing cash, a prepaid phone, and a set of keys. The service entrance is downstairs, past the laundry room. It leads to an alley that connects to Ravenna Boulevard. My car, not the one Nathan knows about, but a Honda I purchased through a shell company of my own, is parked 2 blocks east, outside the 24-hour pharmacy. The keys are in this envelope, along with the address of the FBI field office. You have a shell company? Vanessa asked, surprised. Grim smile crossed my face. Nathan isn't the only one who knows how to create alternative financial structures. The difference is, mine was established to protect assets, not hide crimes. I checked the security feed on my phone one last time. Nathan remained in our bedroom, the door closed. Wait here while I make sure the path is clear. Moving silently through the darkened house, I confirmed that all was quiet, then returned to guide Vanessa down the back stairs. At the service entrance, I handed her a rain jacket with a hood, both protection from the persistent Seattle drizzle and a way to obscure her face from any surveillance cameras Nathan might have placed outside my knowledge. "Call Agent Harrington as soon as you're in the car," I instructed, writing the number on a slip of paper. "Tell him everything, the data falsification, the patient risks, the IPO fraud, and especially the contingency plans. Make it clear this is time-sensitive." Vanessa took the paper, her hand trembling slightly. What if Nathan wakes up before his alarm? What if he discovers I've been here? "He won't," I assured her. "But if anything seems wrong, if I don't contact you by noon today with the confirmation phrase, 'accounting review complete,' assume the worst and tell Agent Harrington to move immediately with or without my recorded evidence." She nodded, tucking the paper into her pocket. Then, to my surprise, she embraced me briefly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for helping me, for being nothing like what he described." I stiffened slightly, caught off guard by both, the gesture and her words. "What did Nathan say about me?" "That you were brilliant but cold, focused on finances and appearances, uninterested in his work or his passion." Vanessa stepped back, offering a sad smile. "He portrayed you as someone who would never understand what drove him, someone content to enjoy the benefits of his success without questioning its source." The description stung, not because it was wholly inaccurate, but because it contained just enough truth to be believable. For years, I had allowed Nathan to define my role in our marriage, the supportive wife who managed our social calendar, who appeared at his side during hospital functions, who never asked too many questions about his research or his finances. Perhaps there was some truth to that, I admitted. Until recently, Vanessa shook her head. "He underestimated you. That might be what saves us all." With those words, she slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness, pulling the hood over her distinctive hair. I watched through the small window as she hurried down the alley, her figure soon disappearing into the shadows between street lights. Only when she was gone did I allow myself a moment of doubt. The plan was logical, methodical, the kind of structured approach I applied to complex financial problems. But this wasn't just about numbers and evidence. This was about confronting the man who had shared my bed for 17 years, who now appeared willing to eliminate anyone who threatened his ambitions, including me. I pushed the doubt aside and returned to my office, carefully restoring everything to its proper place. The investigation board was hidden once more behind the abstract painting. The secret room was closed, its contents secured. The laptop and USB drive were locked in the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. By 5:30 a.m. I was in the kitchen, preparing coffee and a light breakfast as if this were any normal morning. The recording device was discreetly positioned. In the centerpiece on the dining table, a decorative bowl that Nathan never paid attention to. My phone was set to transmit a backup recording to a secure cloud server. As the coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with its familiar aroma, I rehearsed my approach. The questions needed to be natural, conversational, yet specific enough to elicit incriminating responses. I would play the supportive wife, excited about Nathan's press conference, curious about the details in a way that appeared genuine rather than probing. The grandfather clock struck 6, and right on schedule, I heard movement upstairs. Nathan beginning his morning routine. 17 years of marriage had made his habits predictable. Bathroom first, then changing into his running clothes, followed. By a quick check of his phone messages before heading downstairs. I poured coffee into his preferred mug, arranged fruit and toast on the table, and took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the performance of my life. One that would either save vulnerable patients and expose a dangerous fraud, or potentially place me in the same danger Vanessa had fled. The sound of Nathan's footsteps on the stairs signaled that the final act of our marriage was about to begin. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway dressed in his running gear. Expensive compression leggings, a moisture-wicking shirt bearing the logo of a charity marathon he'd sponsored last year, and the custom-fitted running shoes he replaced every 3 months regardless of wear. The perfect image of a health-conscious, successful professional beginning his day with discipline and purpose. "You're up early," he remarked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp, scanning the kitchen as if checking for inconsistencies. "Couldn't sleep?" I handed him his coffee, having prepared it exactly as he preferred, black with a 1/4 teaspoon of raw honey. A small gesture of supposed devotion I'd maintained even after discovering his betrayal. "I have that quarterly review presentation. Today? Thought I'd get an early start." Nathan took a sip, nodding appreciatively. "The Matthews account, right?" My pulse quickened slightly. Last night he'd shown no recognition of this fictional client. Now he was acknowledging it as if it had been part of our regular conversations. Either he'd looked into my work overnight, or he'd been more aware of my deceptions than I'd realized. "Among others," I replied vaguely, setting a plate of sliced fruit before him. "You mentioned today is important. The press conference?" He settled into his chair, checking his fitness watch. I knew his routine down to the minute. He'd allow himself exactly 12 minutes for pre-run nutrition, no more. "Yes, 10 a.m. at Rainier Medical Center. The research team will be presenting our expanded clinical trial data." He paused, studying me. "You should come." The invitation caught me off guard. In recent months, Nathan had kept his professional and personal lives increasingly separate. "Really? I thought these medical presentations would bore me to tears. That's what you always say." "This one's different," he replied, selecting a piece of cantaloupe with precision. "It marks a turning point, not just for the research, but for us. I want you there when they announce the valuation figures." I busied myself with arranging my own breakfast, using the moment to activate the recording device with a subtle press of the remote in my pocket. "The 47 million? Nathan smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's just our personal portion. The company valuation is projected at just over 2 billion. Once Helix Pharmaceuticals completes the acquisition, we'll be positioned among the top neuroscience research facilities in the world." I sat across from him, mentally calculating how to guide the conversation toward the specific details we needed recorded. "That's impressive. The treatment protocol must be showing remarkable results to generate that kind of valuation." "Unprecedented," Nathan confirmed, his professional pride evident. "Neural regeneration rates exceeding 60% in severe trauma cases. Recovery of motor functions in patients previously deemed permanently impaired." He glanced at his watch. 9 minutes, remaining in his allocated breakfast time. "And the side effects?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational. "I remember you mentioning concerns about seizure risks in the early stages." A flicker of suspicion crossed his features before disappearing beneath the smooth veneer of confidence. "Minimal. We've refined the protocol to mitigate neurological stress." This directly contradicted what Vanessa had told me about the dangerous dosage increases. I needed to push further without arousing his suspicion. "That's remarkable," I said, leaning forward with manufactured enthusiasm. "Especially with the increased dosages you mentioned last month. You were concerned they might exceed safety parameters." Nathan's hand paused midway to his mouth, a piece of toast suspended momentarily before continuing its journey. "I don't recall discussing dosage specifics with you, Eleanor. A mistake. I'd pushed too far, referenced details I shouldn't have known." I recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "You probably didn't. But you talk in your sleep sometimes, especially when you're worried about your patients. I've learned more medical terminology that way than I ever wanted to know. The explanation seemed to satisfy him, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. The benefits far outweigh any potential risks. That's why we're expanding to pediatric cases. Children's neural plasticity allows for even more dramatic improvements. Perfect. He'd volunteered exactly the information I needed, and now it was being recorded. Children? That seems like a significant step. Are the protocols the same? Enhanced, actually, Nathan said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when lecturing. We've found that developing brains respond more aggressively to the stimulation parameters. We're increasing baseline frequencies by 37% for the pediatric cohort. My stomach clenched at the casual way he described risking children's brains, but I kept my expression interested, supportive. Fascinating. And the hospital's ethics committee signed off on this? Of course. Nathan finished his coffee, glancing again at his watch. Dr. Levinson was particularly supportive after reviewing our data. He's presenting the findings alongside me today. Another lie, given what we'd seen in Dr. Patel's files. Dr. Levinson had been coerced into cooperation through threats to his career and family. I'm proud of you, I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. A gesture that once would have been genuine but now required every ounce of my acting ability. Taking these treatments from theory to application, helping so many patients. It's extraordinary. Nathan's expression softened, perhaps the closest thing to genuine emotion I'd seen from him in months. It hasn't been without challenges. There are always those who resist innovation, who can't see beyond conventional methodologies. Like Dr. Patel? I ventured, immediately regretting the directness of the question. Nathan's eyes hardened instantly. Where did you hear that name? I scrambled for a plausible explanation. You mentioned him a few weeks ago, said he'd resigned suddenly and it was creating administrative headaches. Is he still causing problems? Dr. Patel has moved on to other opportunities, Nathan replied, his voice carefully measured. His concerns were addressed fully before his departure. Another recorded lie. According to Vanessa, Dr. Patel had been forced out after discovering the data manipulation, threatened with professional ruin if he spoke out. Nathan stood abruptly, checking his fitness watch one final time. I need to get my run in before the press conference preparations begin. He hesitated, then added, Those authorization forms for the asset transfers are in my briefcase. If you could sign them before I return, I'll have Thompson process everything. Immediately, I nodded agreeably. Of course, whatever you need. And Eleanor, he added, his tone shifting subtly, I'd appreciate it if you kept our financial arrangements private. No discussions with your colleagues or friends. The regulatory environment around IPOs is sensitive. Naturally, I replied, maintaining my supportive facade. I understand the need for discretion. Nathan studied my face for a moment longer, as if searching for any signs of deception. Whatever he saw, or didn't see, seemed to satisfy him. Good. I'll be back in an hour. Car will be here at 9:30 to take us to Rainier. With that, he left through the kitchen door that led to our back garden, his expensive running shoes crunching on the gravel path. I remained seated, listening to the sound fade into the distance, only then allowing my carefully constructed expression to collapse. The recording device had captured everything. Nathan's confirmation of the modified treatment protocols, the dangerous pediatric dosage increases, the implied coercion of Dr. Levinson, and the dismissal of Dr. Patel's concerns. Combined with the documentation on the USB drive, it should be enough for the FBI to take immediate action. But I couldn't contact Vanessa or Agent Harrington yet. I needed to find those authorization forms Nathan wanted me to sign. Whatever financial maneuvers he was planning might provide additional evidence of his intent to flee after the IPO. I made my way to the foyer where Nathan had left his briefcase the night before. The sleek leather case was locked, of course, Nathan was nothing if not methodical about security. But after months of quiet investigation, I'd long since acquired the necessary skills for such obstacles. From behind a small decorative panel, in the hallway, I retrieved a duplicate key I'd had made after carefully making an impression of the original months ago. The lock clicked open with a satisfying precision that matched the methodical approach I'd taken to dismantling Nathan's secrets. Inside the briefcase, I found precisely what I'd expected: a folder containing authorization forms for the liquidation of my personal assets, transfer documents for offshore accounts, and, most damning of all, application paperwork for new identities. Nathan had been planning our disappearance with meticulous attention to detail. What I hadn't expected was the small, unlabeled pill bottle tucked into an interior pocket. I carefully extracted it, examining the unmarked capsules inside. My background wasn't medical, but after months of investigating Nathan's research, I'd developed enough knowledge to recognize that these weren't standard pharmaceuticals. These were likely part of the liability elimination protocol referenced in Dr. Patel's files. A chill ran through me as I realized these might have been intended for me, perhaps to be administered during our supposed Italian sabbatical, creating a tragic medical emergency far from questioning eyes. I photographed the bottle and its contents with my phone, then returned it exactly as I'd found it. Next, I examined the authorization forms more carefully. The financial structures Nathan had created were impressive in their complexity. Multiple shell companies nested within each other, transfers routed through increasingly obscure banking jurisdictions, ultimate destinations in non-extradition countries. Had I not been trained in forensic accounting, I might never have understood the true purpose of these arrangements. I photographed each document, then carefully repacked the briefcase exactly as I'd found it, locking it with the duplicate key. Nathan's run would take him on a precise 5-mile route through the neighborhood and nearby park. I had approximately 40 more minutes before his return. Moving quickly but methodically, I returned to my office and retrieved the burner phone from its hiding place. It was time to contact Agent Harrington, but first, I needed to check if Vanessa had reached the FBI safely. I dialed the number I'd given her, and she answered on the first ring. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" "Fine so far," I assured her, keeping my voice low despite knowing Nathan was still on his run. "Did you make contact with Harrington?" "Yes," she confirmed, her voice steadier than it had been hours earlier. "I'm at the field office now. They're reviewing the files from the USB drive and building a case. But, Eleanor, there's something you should know. Nathan had pills," I interrupted, a sense of urgency growing. "Hidden in his briefcase, unlabeled, non-standard. I think they might be part of the contingency plan we saw in the files." Silence on the other end, then. "The FBI pharmacologist needs to see them. Can you—" "I've photographed everything and documented the financial transfers as well," I said. "But there's more." I recorded Nathan discussing the pediatric trial expansion this morning. He explicitly confirmed increased dosages that exceed safety parameters by nearly 40%. "That's exactly what Agent Harrington needed," Vanessa replied, relief evident in her voice. "They're preparing to move, but they need direct evidence of Nathan's knowledge and intent. With the recording, I'll send everything now," I said, already connecting the burner phone to the cloud server where the recording had been automatically uploaded. "But you were about to tell me something. What else should I know?" Vanessa hesitated, and in that pause, I sensed something ominous. The FBI analyzed the patient records from Dr. Patel's files. 3 patients who showed negative reactions to the treatment protocol died within weeks of being removed from the official trial. The causes of death were listed as complications from their original injuries, but the timing and symptoms align perfectly with what would happen if they received continued treatment at the elevated dosages. The implication landed like a physical blow. "You're saying Nathan deliberately—" "We can't prove intent yet," Vanessa said quickly. "But Agent Harrington believes there's enough circumstantial evidence to suggest that patients who might have Exposed problems with the treatment were eliminated to protect the research findings. My mind raced through the implications. If Nathan had already moved from fraud to murder to protect his research, how much more dangerous would he be when confronted with exposure on the verge of his greatest triumph? The press conference, I said suddenly. It's not just about announcing expanded trials. It's about creating a public narrative so compelling that any subsequent questions or concerns would seem like sour grapes from competitors or research rivals. Exactly, Vanessa confirmed. Which is why Agent Harrington wants you to leave the house now. They don't want you there when they confront Nathan. I glanced at my watch. Nathan would return from his run in 25 minutes. The FBI would need time to assemble a team and secure warrants based on the new evidence. If I left now, he might become suspicious, especially if he returned to find me gone after our breakfast conversation. I can't leave yet, I decided. It would alert him that something's wrong, but I won't be at the press conference. Tell Agent Harrington I'll sign the authorization forms as Nathan requested, then claim a work emergency that prevents me from attending. I'll meet the FBI team at Meridian Consulting instead. Eleanor, it's too dangerous, Vanessa protested. If Nathan suspects anything, he won't, I assured her with more confidence than I felt. He's too focused on the press conference and too convinced of his own infallibility to imagine I could be a threat. After ending the call, I securely transmitted the recording and photographs to the encrypted server Agent Harrington had provided. Then I carefully returned the burner phone to its hiding place and made my way back downstairs. In the kitchen, I cleaned up the breakfast dishes, my movements automatic as my mind processed everything I'd learned. Nathan wasn't just a fraudulent researcher or an unfaithful husband. He was potentially a murderer, willing to sacrifice patients to protect his reputation and financial interests. The realization should have terrified me, but instead, I felt an eerie calm descend, the same focused clarity that came over me when unraveling particularly complex financial fraud cases. This was no longer just about exposing Nathan's deception or protecting Vanessa. Lives were at stake, including those of children who would be subjected to dangerous treatments if the press conference proceeded as planned. I heard the back door open, followed by Nathan's familiar footsteps in the mudroom, right on schedule. His run always took exactly 43 minutes, regardless of weather conditions or how early he'd started. Good run? I called out, arranging my features into the pleasant mask I'd perfected over months of investigation. Excellent, Nathan replied, entering the kitchen while checking his fitness metrics. Personal best on the hill section. He looked flushed but energized, the very picture of health and vitality. It was difficult to reconcile this image with the calculating figure from Dr. Patel's files, the man who could dispassionately discuss acceptable collateral considerations when referring to patient deaths. I signed those authorization forms, I said, nodding toward his briefcase, which I'd left conspicuously on the kitchen island. Everything's ready for Thompson to process. Nathan's expression brightened with genuine pleasure, perhaps the most authentic emotion he'd shown in months. Excellent. I'll call him right away. He picked up the briefcase, checking quickly to confirm the signatures before closing it with a satisfied snap. This puts everything in motion, Eleanor. 2 weeks. From now, our lives will be transformed. In more ways than you realize, I thought, maintaining my supportive smile. I'm looking forward to it. Though I have some disappointing news, Johnson moved up the Westlake presentation to this morning. I won't be able to attend your press conference. After all, a flicker of annoyance crossed Nathan's features. You can't reschedule? This is a pivotal moment, Eleanor. Your presence would be noticed. I tried, I lied smoothly. But it's the final discussion before they commit to the merger. Meridian can't afford to lose this account. It represents nearly 20% of our annual revenue. Nathan considered this, and I could almost see him weighing the professional credibility my absence might cost him against the financial benefit of my continued success at Meridian. Predictably, the financial consideration won out. I understand, he said finally. Business obligations come first. Perhaps you can join us for the celebration dinner tonight. I've reserved the private room at Canlis, the exclusive restaurant overlooking Lake Union, where we'd celebrated our engagement 17 years earlier. The symmetry might have seemed romantic had I not known the truth of what Nathan was celebrating. Not our partnership, but the culmination of his fraudulent research and the imminent escape he was planning. I wouldn't miss it, I assured him, already knowing neither of us would be dining there tonight. Nathan nodded, satisfied, then glanced at his watch. I need to shower and prepare my remarks. The car will be here in 45 minutes. As he turned to leave, an impulse seized me, perhaps a need for one final truth between us before everything collapsed. Nathan, I called after him, are you happy? With your work? With us? With everything? He paused, seeming genuinely surprised by the question. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed something authentic beneath the calculated exterior, a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. Happy? He repeated, as if testing the concept. I'm fulfilled, Eleanor. My research is changing lives. Our partnership has provided the stability needed for my work to flourish. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Happiness is a nebulous concept. Achievement, recognition, impact. These are more concrete measures of a life well lived. With that clinical assessment of our marriage and his worldview, he disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen. His answer confirmed what I'd suspected for months. Nathan didn't view our relationship as a partnership between equals or even as an emotional connection. It was a strategic alliance, a foundation for his ambitions, nothing more. I waited until I heard the shower running before retrieving my phone and sending a text to Agent Harrington's secure number. Evidence transmitted. Subject proceeding to press conference at 10 a.m. Will not be accompanying him. Meeting point confirmed at Meridian Consulting 9:15 a.m. The response came seconds later. Received. Team mobilizing. Do not engage further. Proceed directly to the meeting point. I gathered my belongings, laptop, purse, the external hard drive containing backup copies of all evidence. As I prepared to leave the house for what might be the last time, I found myself in the living room, staring at the carefully curated photographs that lined the mantelpiece. Nathan and me at medical charity galas, on vacations, at his hospital award ceremonies. The visual narrative of a successful marriage, a perfect partnership. All of it was constructed, carefully staged, a fiction as deliberate as the research, data Nathan had falsified. I selected one photo, taken on our 10th anniversary, Nathan's arm around my waist, both of us smiling at the camera during a sunset dinner in Santorini. I remembered that moment clearly. The photographer had just cracked a joke and our laughter had been genuine, one authentic moment captured among the carefully managed performances. I placed the photo back on the mantel, turned, and walked out the front door without looking back. The woman who had entered that house 17 years ago as Nathan's adoring wife no longer existed. In her place was someone new. Someone who had developed the strength and determination to dismantle the beautiful lie her life had become. As I drove away from the elegant Victorian on Queen Anne Hill, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Nathan would be emerging from the shower now, preparing for what he believed would be his moment of triumph. Instead, it would mark the beginning of his downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Safe at FBI office. Agent team en route to press conference location. Be careful, Eleanor. I typed a quick response. Heading to Meridian now. We'll contact you when secure. Then, on impulse, I added, whatever happens next, thank you for knocking on my door last night. Because despite everything, the betrayal, the danger, the collapse of my marriage, I felt strangely liberated. The truth, however painful, had set something free within me. And it had all begun with the unlikely appearance of my husband's mistress on my doorstep desperately seeking help. The Meridian Consulting offices occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming downtown Seattle high-rise, offering panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. On any other morning, I might have paused to appreciate the vista as I walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows. Today, I barely registered the scenery as I made my way to the executive conference room where Agent Harrington waited. My assistant's surprised expression as I passed her desk reminded me that I'd originally cleared my calendar for Nathan's press conference. "Mrs. Blackwood, I thought you were taking the morning off," she said, already reaching for her tablet to rearrange my schedule. "Change of plans, Melissa," I replied, not breaking stride. "I'll be in the Puget Sound conference room for the next few hours. No interruptions unless it's an absolute emergency." "Of course," she nodded, professional as always despite her evident curiosity. "Should I order lunch?" "That won't be necessary," I said, already turning the corner toward the conference room. The normalcy of the exchange, discussing lunch while my world collapsed around me, struck me as almost absurdly surreal. Agent Christine Harrington rose as I entered the conference room, extending her hand with the same calm professionalism she'd displayed during our chance encounter at the coffee shop 3 weeks earlier. In her mid-40s with prematurely silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, she had the focused intensity of someone who'd spent decades investigating complex financial crimes. "Mrs. Blackwood," she greeted me, her voice low and measured. "Thank you for coming in. We've established a secure communications hub here with your cooperation." I shook her hand, noting the presence of 3 other agents stationed around the room, each focused on laptop screens displaying various data streams. One showed a live feed of the Rainier Medical Center's main auditorium, where preparations for Nathan's press conference were clearly underway. "Dr. Morgan is secure at our field office," Harrington continued, referring to Vanessa by her professional title. "She's been extremely helpful in contextualizing the medical aspects of the evidence. Our team is in position at Rainier, prepared to intercept Dr. Blackwood before the press conference begins." I set my laptop and external drive on the conference table. "I have additional documentation that wasn't included in this morning's transmission. Financial records tracking fund movements through the Shell Company network, communications between Nathan and Thompson regarding the asset liquidation, and something you should find particularly interesting, evidence of property purchases in Malaysia, Argentina, and Montenegro, all countries without extradition treaties with the United States," Harrington finished for me, a grim smile of professional appreciation crossing her features. "You've been thorough, Mrs. Blackwood." "Call me Eleanor," I said, powering up my laptop. "And thoroughness is essentially my job description." Agent Harrington nodded toward one of her colleagues, who approached to collect my devices for evidence processing. "You understand we'll need to take official statements from you regarding all of this material. The charges we're building against your husband include securities fraud, wire fraud, medical ethics violations, and potentially manslaughter or second-degree murder." Despite having spent months uncovering Nathan's crimes, hearing them laid out, in stark legal terms, sent a chill through me. "I understand. I'm prepared to testify to everything I've discovered." Harrington studied me for a moment, her experienced eyes assessing not just my words but my psychological state. "This can't be easy for you. 17 years of marriage is a significant investment." A humorless laugh escaped me before I could suppress it. "An interesting choice of words, Agent Harrington. Investment. That's essentially how Nathan viewed our marriage. A strategic allocation of resources designed to generate optimal returns." I moved toward the windows, looking out at the city where I'd built my life with a man who'd turned out to be a stranger. The hardest part isn't losing him. It's recognizing that I never really had him in the first place. One of the agents monitoring the laptops called out, "Subject has arrived at Rainier Medical Center. Field team confirms visuals." Harrington gestured for me to join her near the central display, which showed a live feed from the security cameras. At the medical center, Nathan was visible entering through the VIP entrance, surrounded by members of his research team and hospital administrators. He looked confident, perfectly groomed in his bespoke suit, ready for his moment of triumph. "We'll wait until he's inside the building and away from public areas," Harrington explained. "The arrest will be conducted discreetly to minimize disruption and potential evidence destruction by associates." I watched the screen as Nathan moved through the medical center's corridors, occasionally stopping to shake hands with colleagues or accept congratulations from hospital staff. None of them knew they were witnessing the final moments of his freedom. "Our agents are positioned here, here, and here," Harrington indicated on a schematic of the building. "Once Dr. Blackwood enters the preparation room adjacent to the auditorium, they'll move in. We have warrants for his arrest, as well as for seizure of all research materials, financial documents, and electronic devices." On the screen, Nathan had reached the preparation room, the same space where he'd rehearsed countless presentations and speeches over the years. I'd accompanied him to many of them, watching from the sidelines as he charmed audiences and colleagues alike. Today would be different. "Suspect is in position," reported one of the agents. "Field team moving in now." Another screen activated, showing the interior of the preparation room from what appeared to be a security camera feed. Nathan was reviewing his notes while a technical staff member adjusted his microphone. Several other researchers, including Dr. Levinson, were gathered around a table reviewing presentation slides. The door to the preparation room opened, and 3 individuals in business attire entered. Though they weren't wearing anything that identified them as FBI, something in their bearing, the purposeful stride, the alertness in their postures, immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. "Dr. Nathan Blackwood?" the lead agent asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. Nathan looked up, momentary confusion crossing his features before his professional mask slipped back into place. "Yes? Can I help you? We're about to begin a press conference. I'm Special Agent Thomas Rivera, FBI." The agent displayed his credentials. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of FDA research protocols." The blood drained from Nathan's face so quickly it was visible even on the grainy security feed. Around him, his colleagues froze in various poses of shock, except for Dr. Levinson, whose expression showed something closer to grim vindication. "This is absurd." Nathan recovered quickly, his voice regaining its authoritative tone. "There's clearly been some misunderstanding. If you'll allow me to contact my attorney..." "You'll have the opportunity to contact legal representation at the field office," Agent Rivera replied, unmoved. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Nathan's eyes darted around the room, assessing his options with the same clinical detachment he applied to medical diagnoses. For a moment, it seemed he might attempt to resist or escape. Then his gaze landed on Dr. Levinson, and something in the older doctor's expression must have communicated volumes, because Nathan's shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. "This is a mistake," he said as he complied with the agent's instructions, allowing himself to be handcuffed. "A competitor's attempt to sabotage our research on the day of our biggest announcement. My attorney will have this sorted out within hours." As the agents began to escort Nathan from the room, he suddenly looked directly at the security camera, his expression hardening into something cold and calculating. "Where's my wife?" he demanded. "Did Eleanor know about this? Is she involved?" The question sent a chill through me, even from the safety of Meridian's conference room. Nathan's analytical mind was already connecting the dots, realizing that my absence from the press conference wasn't coincidental. Agent Harrington noticed my reaction. "He doesn't know where you are," she assured me, "and he won't, not until formal charges are filed and discovery begins." On the screen, Nathan was being led through a service corridor to avoid the press gathered in the main lobby. His expression had transformed from shock to a controlled fury that I recognized all too well. The same look he'd worn when confronting colleagues who challenged his research methodologies or questioned his conclusions. He's already planning. His defense, I observed, watching his familiar mannerisms even in handcuffs. The way he's holding his head, the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth, he believes he can outsmart this situation. Agent Harrington nodded. Most white-collar criminals do, especially those with Nathan's intelligence and resources. But the evidence is overwhelming, and with testimony from both you and Dr. Morgan, along with the documentation from Dr. Patel, don't underestimate him, I warned, unable to shake a growing sense of unease as I watched my husband being escorted into an unmarked FBI vehicle. Nathan's entire career has been built on contingency planning and risk management. He won't have left himself without options. As if confirming my concerns, Nathan looked directly into the security camera one last time before entering the vehicle. The expression on his face wasn't defeat or even anger. It was the calculated look of a chess player who had anticipated his opponent's move and was already formulating his counter-strategy. "We should return to the field office," Harrington decided, signaling to her team to begin packing up their equipment. "You'll need to provide formal statements, and we should ensure both you and Dr. Morgan remain secure until we've conducted a full assessment of potential threats from Dr. Blackwood's associates." As the agents prepared to move out, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed my assistant's name. I initially moved to decline it, remembering my instructions about emergencies only, but something, intuition perhaps, made me answer instead. "Melissa, I'm in the middle of something important." "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry to interrupt." My assistant's voice held an unusual edge of tension. "But there's someone here demanding to see you. A Mr. Thompson? He says it's regarding your husband, and that it's extremely urgent." Thompson, Nathan's financial advisor, the man responsible for structuring the offshore accounts and shell companies. The same man who was supposed to process the asset transfer authorizations I'd signed that morning. "Is he alone?" I asked, already catching Agent Harrington's attention with a raised hand. "Yes, but he's being quite insistent. Security is with him now in the reception area. Should I have him escorted out?" I covered the phone and quickly explained the situation to Harrington. "Thompson is one of Nathan's key accomplices in the financial fraud. If he's here looking for me, something's wrong." Harrington made an immediate decision. "Keep him there. We'll take him into custody as well." She turned to her team. "Rivera, Peterson, secure the elevators and stairwells. Chen, with me, to the reception." I returned to the call. "Melissa, please tell Mr. Thompson I'll be down shortly. Have security stay with him, but be polite. Don't give him any reason to leave." "Understood, Mrs. Blackwood." As I ended the call, Harrington was already coordinating with additional agents via her secure radio. "We need a subtle approach," she said. "If Thompson realizes it's a trap, he might have time to alert other associates or destroy evidence on his person." "Let me speak to him first," I suggested. "He'll expect me to be ignorant of what's happening with Nathan. I can keep him talking while your agents get into position." Harrington considered this briefly before nodding. "Stay behind me at all times. If he makes any sudden movements or reaches into his clothing, move away immediately." We took the executive elevator down to the reception area, accompanied by Agent Chen, while the other agents secured alternate exits. As the doors opened, I caught sight of Thompson pacing nervously near the reception desk, checking his watch repeatedly. Gregory Thompson was the perfect picture of financial respectability. Silver-haired, expensively dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to managing vast sums of money. Only those who looked closely might notice the slightly too tight smile, the darting eyes, the faint sheen of perspiration on his forehead despite the building's climate control. "Eleanor!" he exclaimed upon seeing me, relief washing over his features. "Thank God. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." I stepped forward, maintaining a calm exterior while Harrington and Chen positioned themselves strategically nearby, appearing to be ordinary office workers. "Gregory, this is unexpected. What brings you to Meridian?" Thompson glanced at the security guard standing a few feet away, then lowered his voice, There's been a complication with Nathan's arrangements. The transfers we initiated this morning have been flagged by compliance systems at 2 of the intermediary banks. We need to implement the contingency protocols immediately. I see, I replied, working to keep my expression appropriately concerned, rather than triumphant. The financial tripwires I'd quietly set up through contacts at several banks had been triggered exactly as planned. Perhaps we should discuss this in private. We can use one of our conference rooms. Thompson nodded gratefully, clearly relieved by my cooperative response. Yes, that would be best. Time is of the essence, Eleanor. The secondary authentication protocols need your biometric verification within the next 30 minutes, or the entire network of transfers will be frozen pending investigation. As we moved toward the elevators, I noticed how Thompson's right hand remained inside his jacket pocket, gripping something with evident tension. The slight bulge suggested it might be a phone, or something more dangerous. Agent Harrington had noticed it too, subtly shifting her position to maintain a clear line of sight as we walked. She and Agent Chen followed at a discreet distance, appearing to be engaged in casual conversation. Which contingency protocol did Nathan indicate we should use? I asked casually as we waited for the elevator. He mentioned several options this morning, but things were a bit rushed. Thompson's expression flickered with momentary confusion. Protocol C, of course, the full extraction scenario. He lowered his voice further. Eleanor, hasn't Nathan contacted you? There's been an incident at the medical center. The whole press conference has been compromised. My phone's been in do not disturb mode during a client meeting, I explained smoothly. What kind of incident? The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and as the doors opened, Thompson's hand emerged from his pocket. Not holding a weapon, but a small electronic device that looked like a specialized phone. I'll explain everything once we're secure. We need to move quickly. As we stepped into the elevator, Agent Harrington and Chen moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves on either side of Thompson. Mr. Gregory Thompson, Harrington announced, displaying her credentials. I'm Special Agent Christine Harrington with the FBI. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. Thompson's reaction was immediate and violent. He lunged for the elevator control panel, simultaneously raising the electronic device in his hand. System Purge Alpha, he shouted into it, clearly triggering some prearranged command. Agent Chen reacted instantly, subduing Thompson with a swift takedown that sent the device skittering across the elevator floor. I backed against the wall as Harrington secured it, examining the screen which was now displaying a rapidly executing program. Remote Data Destruction Protocol, she announced grimly, immediately contacting her team via radio. All units suspected have initiated electronic countermeasures. Secure all devices at Blackwood residence and office locations immediately. As Chen handcuffed the now subdued Thompson, Harrington turned to me. This device was activating remote wiping of electronic systems. Do you know what might be targeted? The realization hit me with sickening clarity. The home network, Nathan's private servers, the research database. I pulled out my phone, quickly accessing the home security system I'd modified with my own independent backup protocols. I can at least save the security footage and access logs if I... Before I could complete the process, my phone screen flashed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Given the circumstances, I showed it to Harrington before answering the speaker. Eleanor Blackwood, I answered cautiously. Hello, Eleanor. Nathan's voice, calm and controlled despite the chaos of the last hour. I believe we need to discuss the terms of our separation. I froze, looking at Harrington in confusion. Nathan should have been in FBI custody, not making phone calls. Nathan? Where are you? His soft chuckle sent a chill down my spine. Let's just say the FBI's arrest procedures have certain vulnerabilities when dealing with someone of my resources and preparation. But that's not why I'm calling. Harrington was already on her radio. urgently requesting status updates from the transport team. The tension in her face confirmed my growing dread. "What do you want, Nathan?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Want? Such a simple word for a complex situation. His tone was almost conversational, as if we were discussing dinner plans rather than speaking from wherever he'd managed to escape to. "I want recognition for my research. I want the freedom to continue my work without regulatory interference. I want the life I've spent decades building." He paused, his voice hardening. "But most immediately, I want you to understand the consequences of your betrayal, Eleanor. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans for this exact scenario? That I wouldn't recognize your hand in all of this?" Harrington's radio crackled with an urgent report. "Transport team down. 2 agents were injured. Subject escaped approximately 7 minutes ago. Assistance required. Repeat, assistance required," Nathan continued, having clearly heard the radio transmission. "You've always been brilliant with numbers, Eleanor. So, let me give you some to consider. 27 patients are currently receiving my treatment protocol. 8 of them are children. All of them with monitoring implants that can be remotely adjusted to deliver a lethal electrical stimulus with the press of a button." My blood ran cold as I realized what he was saying. "Nathan, those are innocent people. Innocent? Perhaps? Leverage? Definitely." His voice was clinical, detached, the same tone he used when discussing complex surgical procedures. "Here's my proposal. The FBI terminates their investigation. All charges dropped. My research continues without interference. In exchange, 27's. Patients get to live." Agent Harrington, her face pale but determined, took over. "Dr. Blackwood, this is Special Agent Christine Harrington. You should know that threats against patients elevate this situation to terrorism charges. The negotiation you're attempting won't—" "I'm not negotiating, Agent Harrington," Nathan interrupted smoothly. "I'm stating facts. My research facility has a proprietary remote monitoring system for all neural implants. That system includes emergency intervention capabilities designed to terminate treatment in case of adverse reactions. With simple code modifications, those same capabilities can deliver fatal stimulation patterns." The clinical precision of his threat made it all the more terrifying. This wasn't an emotional outburst, but a calculated strategy from a man who had anticipated this scenario and prepared accordingly. "You have 90 minutes to arrange my demands," Nathan continued. "After that, I'll begin with adult patients first, 1 every 15 minutes. The children will be last, a professional courtesy, shall we say." He paused, then added with chilling finality, "Oh, and Eleanor? I've left something for you at home. Consider it a parting gift between spouses. 90 minutes. The line went dead, leaving us staring at each other in the elevator's confined space. The next 15 minutes unfolded in a blur of urgent activity. Agent Harrington converted the Meridian Consulting Conference Room into an emergency command center, coordinating with field teams, medical experts, and technical specialists while I struggled to process Nathan's transformation from brilliant neurologist to terrorist. "We need to locate and secure the control system for these implants," Harrington directed as her team expanded around us. "Doctor, Morgan is being brought here from the field office. Her medical expertise might help us understand what we're dealing with." I paced the length of the conference room, forcing my shock aside to focus on the immediate threat. Nathan maintains 3 separate research facilities: the main lab at Rainier Medical Center, a secondary facility at the university, and a private lab in our home's basement. I paused, remembering his final words. He said he left something for me at home. Could the control system be there? "Possibly, but it could also be a trap," Harrington warned. "We already have teams securing the medical center and university facilities. I'm deploying a specialized unit to your residence now, but they'll need guidance on what to look for." Pulled up the home's architectural plans on my laptop, indicating the basement laboratory's layout. "The lab is here, access controlled through this door," Nathan's primary servers are in this adjacent room, climate-controlled with redundant power systems. As we reviewed the plans, Vanessa arrived, escorted by 2 agents. Her eyes widened as she took in the command center atmosphere. "What's happened, Agent?" Harrington quickly briefed her on Nathan's escape and threat against the patients, while I continued working with the technical team to identify potential access points to the neural implant system. "The implants aren't designed to be lethal," Vanessa said firmly after absorbing the information. "They're calibrated for precise, low-level stimulation of injured neural pathways. Even with modified parameters, they shouldn't be capable of delivering enough current to cause death." Nathan seemed convinced otherwise, I countered. "And given what we've uncovered about his ethics and methods..." Vanessa frowned, her medical training evident in her analytical approach. "The only way to make them dangerous would be to override multiple safety protocols and substantially increase the power supply. That would require physical modifications to the implant programming units, not just remote commands." "Could he have made those modifications in advance?" Harrington asked. "As a contingency plan?" "Possibly," Vanessa admitted reluctantly. "But it would mean he'd been planning this for months, deliberately altering medical devices during implantation, with the specific intent of using them as weapons later." The horrifying implication hung in the air. Had Nathan been installing what amounted to remote-controlled death devices in his patients' brains, including children, as an insurance policy? Against exposure? "We have to assume the worst," Harrington decided. "Dr. Morgan, what would we need to block these signals if they exist?" While Vanessa consulted with the FBI's technical specialists, I received an alert from the home security system on my phone. The FBI team had arrived at our house and was preparing to enter. I activated the camera feeds, watching as the tactical unit approached the front door with practiced efficiency. "Wait," I said, stopping them through the communication link Harrington had established. "The main entrance has redundant security systems. Let me deactivate them remotely." I entered my override codes, disabling the more sophisticated security, measures Nathan had installed without my knowledge, measures I'd discovered and secretly mapped during my investigation. The team acknowledged and proceeded inside, their body cameras providing multiple perspectives as they swept through the house. "The lab entrance is at the end of the hallway past the kitchen," I directed. "There's a keypad lock and biometric scanner." The team leader approached the door, examining the security system. "We'll need access codes or authorization to proceed, without triggering potential countermeasures." I provided my access credentials, though I knew Nathan would have almost certainly revoked them by now. "These may not work. Nathan would have..." "Access denied," the team leader confirmed. "Preparing for alternative entry methods." While the tactical team worked on breaching the lab, another agent was examining a small package placed prominently on the kitchen island. "Mrs. Blackwood, there's an envelope here addressed to you. Given the circumstances, we should treat it as potentially dangerous." The camera zoomed in on an elegant cream-colored envelope with my name written in Nathan's distinctive handwriting. His parting gift, presumably. "Scan it for hazardous materials before opening," Harrington instructed, "and photograph the contents in place." Minutes later, after confirming the envelope contained nothing dangerous, the agent carefully opened it, revealing a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The camera provided a clear view of Nathan's precise script. "Eleanor, by now you've discovered much about me that I kept hidden during our marriage. Consider this final revelation my acknowledgement of your exceptional investigative skills. The attached drive contains the truth about Blackwood Neural Therapeutics, not the sanitized version for regulators or investors, but the complete research, findings, including the failures I never documented officially. What you do with this information is your choice, but know this: every breakthrough requires sacrifice. History judges innovations by their outcomes, not their methods. The patients were never at risk from the treatment protocol itself. The true risk was always from those who would halt the research before it reached its full potential, including you." 17 years is a significant investment to lose, Eleanor. I wonder if you've calculated the full cost of your betrayal. He's playing mind games, Harrington observed as we read the note. Trying to create doubt and division. I wasn't so sure. Something about the tone felt genuinely revelatory, as if Nathan was finally dropping the pretense and speaking honestly, perhaps for the first time in our marriage. The USB drive could contain crucial information about the implant system, I pointed out. Or it could be another trap, malware designed to compromise your systems when connected. We'll examine it in an isolated environment, Harrington agreed, instructing her team accordingly. In the meantime, we need to— She was interrupted by an urgent call from the tactical team at our house. We've breached the laboratory. You need to see this immediately. The body camera feeds showed the team entering Nathan's pristine lab space, the private sanctuary where he often worked late into the night on projects he claimed were too preliminary to discuss. What they found inside was both unexpected and chilling. The lab wasn't just a research space, it was a command center. Multiple screens displayed patient data, monitoring vital signs and neural activity in real time. A central console featured what appeared to be a customized interface for the implant system, currently displaying a countdown timer reading 68:42 and counting down. It's automated, I realized, cold dread washing over me. Nathan doesn't need to be present to carry out his threat. He's programmed the system to execute commands at specific intervals unless countermanded. Vanessa leaned closer to the screen, examining the patient monitoring displays. Those are real-time feeds from the implants. He's actively connected to all 27 patients right now. Her voice tightened with professional horror. Including the children. Agent Harrington immediately contacted her technical specialists. We need to either shut down that system or take control of it before that timer reaches 0. Options? The lead technician looked grim. Shutting it down without understanding the fail-safes could trigger the very outcome we're trying to prevent. These systems often have deadman switches, interruptions in connection that automatically execute emergency protocols. Then we take control, Harrington decided. Can your team interface with it remotely? Not without the access credentials. Everything about this setup suggests proprietary, custom-built systems with multiple security layers. I studied the screen, noticing something familiar about the interface design. That's based on the Meridian Financial Security Framework. I recognize the architecture. We developed it for banking systems. You know how it works? Harrington asked, hope edging into her voice. I helped design the original system, I confirmed. Nathan must have adapted it for his purposes. The core authentication protocols would be similar, even with modifications. A plan began forming in my mind, dangerous but potentially our only option given the time constraint. I need to go there, in person, if it's based on the Meridian framework. I might be able to bypass the security using administrator overrides we built into the original system. Harrington looked skeptical. It's too risky. Nathan could have booby-trapped the entire system to prevent exactly this kind of intervention. Maybe, I acknowledged. But he also built this using architecture I intimately understand. That gives us an advantage he might not have anticipated. While Harrington considered my proposal, one of her agents called for attention. We've completed preliminary analysis of the USB drive. It appears to contain research data as indicated, but there's also an embedded video file addressed to Mrs. Blackwood. Everyone turned toward the central screen as the agent opened the video file. Nathan's face appeared, recorded in what looked like his downtown apartment, the secret secondary residence I'd discovered during my investigation. Hello, Eleanor, the recorded Nathan said, his expression calm and composed despite the circumstances. If you're watching this, then events have proceeded much as I anticipated. My contingency plans have been activated, and you're now facing an impossible choice. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes showing a cold intensity I'd glimpsed only rarely during our marriage. You always excelled at risk assessment, so let me frame this situation in terms you'll appreciate. The lives of 27 patients against my freedom to continue my research. A straightforward calculation from a purely utilitarian perspective. Nathan smiled thinly. But we both know it's not that simple. The modified treatment protocol these patients are receiving represents the only hope for thousands of others with similar neural injuries. Shutting down my research to satisfy regulatory purists would ultimately cost far more lives than it saves. He leaned back, his demeanor shifting subtly. There's something else you should know, Eleanor. Something I never shared during our marriage. The neural regeneration techniques I've pioneered weren't developed for profit or prestige. They were created for someone specific. For the first time, a genuine emotion flickered across Nathan's features. Something that looked almost like grief. My sister Caroline has been in a persistent vegetative state for 23 years, following a car accident when she was 16. The accident that killed our parents and left me as her only family. Her only advocate. I gasped audibly. In 17 years of marriage, Nathan had never once mentioned a sister. He had always claimed to be an only child whose parents died in an accident during his medical school years. She's been in a private care facility under a different name, Nathan continued. Every treatment advancement, every protocol refinement, has been tested and adapted with her condition in mind. The children in the current trial group have neural damage patterns remarkably similar to Caroline's. He paused, letting the revelation sink in. So you see, Eleanor, this isn't just about my research or my freedom. It's about the one promise I've never broken, to find a way to bring my sister back. The video ended abruptly, leaving us staring at a frozen frame of Nathan's face, more vulnerable and human than I'd seen it in years. Agent Harrington broke the stunned silence. We need to verify this information immediately. If he does have a sister in long-term care, we need to locate her. But I was already processing the implications of this revelation. If Nathan's primary motivation had been helping his sister rather than pure profit or prestige, it didn't excuse his methods, but it did recontextualize them. It also suggested a potential leverage point, one that might allow us to resolve the crisis without loss of life. I need to talk to him, I said suddenly. Not to negotiate his freedom, but to offer an alternative he might accept. Absolutely not, Harrington replied firmly. We don't negotiate with terrorists regardless of their motivations. It's not negotiation, I insisted. It's a redirect. If his core motivation is truly helping his sister and similar patients, there might be a path forward that doesn't require either capitulation to his demands or risking patient lives. The timer on the lab console continued its relentless countdown. 65, Parker 17, 65, 16, 65, Cat 15. Every second brought us closer to Nathan's deadline, with 27 lives hanging in the balance. The journey to our home on Queen Anne Hill took exactly 12 minutes, though it felt far longer as I sat in the back of an FBI tactical vehicle, mentally preparing for what might be the most important confrontation of my life. Agent Harrington had reluctantly agreed to my plan, but only with significant safeguards in place. You'll wear this communications device at all times, she instructed, fitting a nearly invisible earpiece into my ear. Our behavioral analysts will be monitoring every exchange and providing real-time guidance if needed. I nodded, focusing on remaining calm despite the growing pressure. The timer in Nathan's lab had continued its countdown, now showing just under 63 minutes remaining. Remember, your only objective is to buy time and identify a way to safely disable the implant control system, Harrington continued. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to negotiate terms for his surrender without authorization. As we approached the house, I could see the perimeter established by FBI agents, discreet but comprehensive, with tactical teams positioned out of sight from the street. To any neighbors glancing out their windows, it might appear to be nothing, more unusual than a gathering of unmarked vehicles. We've established that the system isn't transmitting signals to any external location, the technical lead briefed me. Everything is contained within the lab's local network, which is a mixed blessing. It means we don't have to worry about Nathan triggering it from a remote location, but it also means any shutdown or override needs to happen directly at the source. The vehicle stopped a block from the house, allowing me to approach on foot, as if returning home normally, a precaution in case Nathan had additional surveillance we hadn't identified. Remember, we have no confirmation that Nathan isn't physically present somewhere in the house, Harrington warned one final time. Our thermal scans suggest no other occupants, but the basement lab is heavily shielded. Proceed with extreme caution. Walked the familiar path to our front door, the weight of 27 lives pressing down on me with each step. The same door I'd left through just hours earlier, believing the worst was over. How drastically everything had changed. The tactical team had restored the house to its normal appearance after their initial entry, making it seem as though nothing was amiss. I entered my security code and stepped inside, immediately struck by the eerie normalcy of it all. The same elegant foyer, the same grandfather clock ticking steadily in the hallway, the same carefully curated art on the walls. All of it now felt like an elaborate stage set rather than a home. "I'm inside," I murmured, knowing the team would hear me through the communication device. Proceeding to the lab, I moved through the quiet house toward the basement entrance, every sense alert for any sign of Nathan's presence. The door to the lab stood open where the tactical team had breached it earlier. Descending the stairs, I could see the blue glow of multiple monitors casting shadows across the immaculate space. Nathan's private lab had always been off-limits to me, his creative sanctuary, where he could work without distraction. Now I understand why. The room was a testament to his deception. One wall displayed brain scans labeled with patient identifiers. Another held pharmaceutical formulations that didn't match the officially documented treatment protocols, and the central workstation controlled it all. The countdown timer dominated the main screen, 61:42, 61:41, 61:40. "I'm at the control console," I reported quietly. "Beginning system assessment." I sat at Nathan's ergonomic chair, taking in the sophisticated interface before me. As I'd suspected, the underlying architecture was based on the Meridian security framework, but with significant modifications. Nathan had retained the core structure while adding layers of proprietary protection. "The system is requiring multiple authentication factors," I informed the technical team. "Biometric, password, and what appears to be a physical security key." "Can you bypass them?" came the response in my ear. I studied the interface, looking for the backdoor access routes we'd built into the original Meridian system. "Possibly, but it will take time. I'm going to try administrator override protocols first." As I began working through the system's defenses, a notification appeared on one of the secondary monitors. "Incoming communication request." My heart jumped. "There's an incoming call to the system. It has to be Nathan." "Accept it, Harrington," directed after a brief consultation with her team. "Keep him talking while we continue working on the technical solution." I clicked to accept the communication, and Nathan's face appeared on the screen. He was in a location I didn't recognize, minimalist, windowless, possibly underground. "Eleanor," he greeted me, his tone almost conversational. "I thought you might find your way to the lab. You always were remarkably resourceful." "Nathan," I acknowledged, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You've gone to extraordinary lengths to make your point." His expression remained composed, clinical. "Not to make a point, Eleanor. To protect my life's work. There's a difference." I gestured toward the patient monitoring screens. "By threatening innocent people? Children? This isn't protection, Nathan. It's terrorism." "Clinical terminology doesn't interest me," he replied dismissively. "Results do. And right now, The result I need is for the FBI to stand down and allow my research to continue without interference. I leaned forward, thinking of the sister he'd kept secret for 17 years. Tell me about Caroline. The question visibly startled him, perhaps the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him in months. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing something raw underneath. You've seen the video, he recovered quickly. Then you understand why this research can't be allowed to fail. She's been waiting 23 years for a breakthrough, Eleanor. 23 years while regulatory bureaucrats and ethical hand-wringers debate acceptable parameters and tolerable risk levels. I understand your motivation, I said carefully, following the guidance being whispered in my ear by the FBI behavioral analyst. But holding patients hostage undermines everything you claim to be working toward. If Caroline could see this, what would she think? His expression hardened. Don't presume to know what my sister would think. You didn't even know she existed. Until today. Because you never told me, I countered, real hurt mixing with strategic confrontation. 17 years, Nathan. We shared a life, a home, supposedly everything. Yet you kept your own sister secret. Why? Something shifted in his gaze, a momentary vulnerability quickly suppressed. Caroline was never part of our arrangement, Eleanor. Our marriage was built on mutual benefit. My social standing enhanced by your financial acumen. Your lifestyle elevated by my professional success. It functioned perfectly within those parameters. The cold assessment of our relationship stung, despite its accuracy. And Vanessa? Was she just another arrangement? Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Dr. Morgan was a complication, professionally valuable but emotionally unpredictable. Her pregnancy was never part of the plan. While we talked, my fingers continued working on the system, searching for vulnerability points in the security protocol. Each exchange with Nathan bought precious seconds for both my efforts and those of the FBI technical team analyzing the system remotely. The timer continues counting down, Nathan, I said, nodding toward the display now showing 58:27. Is that really what you want? To be responsible for harming people you claim to be helping? That responsibility lies with those who forced my hand, he replied smoothly. Including you, Eleanor. You chose investigation over loyalty, exposure over protection. Actions have consequences. As he spoke, I located what appeared to be a potential access point, a subdirectory labeled Protocol Override that matched the emergency access structure from the original Meridian framework. What if there's another way? I suggested. Still, working beneath the visible interface. A compromise that allows your research to continue under modified protocols with appropriate oversight? Compromise? Nathan's laugh held no humor. The moment regulatory agencies gain control, innovation dies under paperwork and committee approvals. Caroline doesn't have time for compromise. Neither do your current patients if that timer reaches 0, I countered, accessing the override. Directory while maintaining eye contact with Nathan's image. You became a doctor to help people, Nathan. Whatever else has happened, I know that was genuine. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. The implants aren't designed to be lethal, Eleanor. They're configured to simulate stroke. Conditions: severe but potentially survivable with immediate medical intervention. This admission confirmed what Vanessa had suggested earlier. The threat, while serious, had limitations Nathan hadn't disclosed. I maintained my focus on him, while copying this information to the FBI through the communication system. Then you haven't crossed the final line yet, I said, finding the access point I needed in the system architecture. There's still a way back from this, Nathan. For you. For your research. For Caroline. The mention of his sister again caused that momentary crack in his facade, the vulnerability I needed to keep him engaged while I worked. What way back? He asked, skepticism evident but not dismissive. The FBI is already building their case. The research is compromised. the funding will evaporate. I paused my typing, looking directly into the camera. Let me see her, Nathan. Take me to Caroline. My request to see Caroline clearly caught Nathan off guard. His composed expression faltered, genuine surprise replacing his clinical detachment. That's not possible, he said after a moment's hesitation. Her location is secure and private. It's the only way forward, Nathan, I insisted, still working on the system override while maintaining eye contact with his image. If your motivation truly is helping Caroline, let me understand who she is, what she means to you. Help me see what's driving all of this. In my ear, Agent Harrington's voice was cautious but supportive. This could work. If he takes you to his sister, it gives us a chance to locate him and end this standoff. Nathan studied me through the video connection, his analytical mind visibly weighing options, calculating risks and benefits with the same precision he applied to surgical procedures. Why would you want to see her? He finally asked. What possible difference could it make at this point? Because for 17 years I thought I knew you, I answered truthfully. Now I realize there was an entire part of your life, the most important part, that you kept hidden. I want to understand why this matters so much that you'd risk everything for it. Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a softening almost. Imperceptible to anyone who hadn't studied his micro-expressions for nearly 2 decades. She's all I have left, Eleanor, the only family that matters. I felt the FBI behavioral analyst whisper in my ear, You're connecting. Keep going. Then help me understand, I pressed gently. If Caroline is the reason behind everything you've done, I need to see her. Not just for me, but for those 27 patients whose lives are currently on your countdown timer. Nathan's gaze flicked to the timer display, now reading 54:18 before returning to me. Even if I agreed, the logistics would be impossible. The FBI has the house surrounded, and Caroline's facility is 30 minutes away. The FBI wants a peaceful resolution, I countered, following Harrington's whispered guidance. If taking me to Caroline creates a path to ending this without lives lost, they'll facilitate it. This was a calculated risk, offering Nathan what might appear to be an escape opportunity while actually luring him into a controlled situation where the FBI could apprehend him without endangering patients. And what guarantee do I have that this isn't simply a trap? Nathan asked, his natural suspicion reasserting itself. The same guarantee I have that the countdown isn't a bluff, I replied evenly. None at all. We're both operating on incomplete information and limited trust. While this exchange continued, I had successfully located the system override architecture beneath the visible interface. The Meridian Framework's emergency access protocols were still intact, though Nathan had added additional security layers. With careful navigation, I was making progress toward accessing the implant control systems without triggering alarms. Nathan fell silent, weighing his options. Then, with sudden decisiveness, Very well. A brief visit, under controlled conditions. You come alone without FBI tracking or surveillance. I'll text instructions to your personal phone, not the burner they've undoubtedly given you. In my ear, Harrington was already issuing orders. We'll need to place a discreet tracker on her, something he won't detect during an inevitable search. I nodded slightly to acknowledge her, then responded to Nathan. Agreed, but as a show of good faith, you need to extend the countdown. Give us more time to resolve this without rushing. Nathan considered this briefly, then made an adjustment on his end. The countdown timer reset from 53:42 to 1:20 hour, 2 full hours. 2 hours, he confirmed. But if you're not at the designated location within 30 minutes, or if I detect any FBI presence, the timer reverts to immediate execution. Understood. One more thing, Eleanor, Nathan added, his tone darkening. Come alone means exactly that. No Agent Harrington, no tactical teams, and especially no Dr. Morgan. Just you. The specific mention of Harrington by name confirmed what I'd suspected. Nathan had access to information from inside the FBI operation, Perhaps through surveillance I hadn't detected or an informant within their ranks. Just me, I confirmed, maintaining a calm exterior while signaling this concerning development to Harrington through a prearranged gesture. Nathan ended the video call abruptly, leaving me staring at the blank screen while the countdown timer continued its measured pace at the new 2-hour mark. "He has inside information," Harrington said immediately through my earpiece. "We need to assume operational security is compromised." I rose from the console, having completed as much of the override preparation as possible. "I've established a backdoor into the system. Your technical team should be able to access it remotely using the credentials I've transmitted. It won't stop the countdown yet, but it gives us visibility into the full implant control architecture." "Excellent work," Harrington acknowledged. "Now, about this meeting. It's extraordinarily dangerous, but potentially our best opportunity to locate both Nathan and his sister while resolving the patient situation." I made my way back upstairs, speaking quietly to avoid any surveillance Nathan might have in the house. "He'll be extremely cautious. Whatever tracking you use needs to be undetectable through standard searches. We've already considered that," Harrington assured me as I exited the house to rejoin her in the tactical vehicle. "Our technical team has nano-trackers that can be embedded in your clothing fibers or even temporarily bonded to your skin. Undetectable, without specialized equipment." In the vehicle, I found not just Harrington but Vanessa as well, her expression tense with concern. "This is insanely risky," Vanessa said immediately. "Nathan is methodical and paranoid under normal circumstances. Now that he's cornered, he's unpredictable and dangerous." "I know him better than anyone," I reminded her. "Including his tells, when he's lying or planning something. That gives me an advantage." "You know the version of him he allowed you to see?" Vanessa countered. "We both do, but neither of us knew about Caroline until today. What else might we not know?" It was a valid question, one that had been haunting me since the revelations began unfolding. How well did I truly know the man I'd been married to for 17 years? "That's why I need to see her," I explained. "Caroline is the missing piece, the motivation that makes sense of everything else. If I understand her situation, I might better understand what's driving Nathan's decisions." My phone chimed with an incoming text from a blocked number. The message contained an address in Bellevue, an upscale suburb across Lake Washington from Seattle, along with specific instructions. "Come alone. Take a taxi, not your car or a car. Ride share. Bring nothing electronic except your phone. You have 25 minutes. I showed the message to Harrington, who immediately began coordinating with her team. The address matches a private long-term care facility called Lakeview Retreat. Very exclusive, very discreet. We have no record of Caroline Blackwood as a patient there. She wouldn't be under that name, I reasoned. Nathan said she was registered under a different identity. "We'll need to deploy teams covertly," Harrington decided. "The facility is on 10 acres of landscaped grounds, which gives us coverage options without alerting Nathan." While tactical preparations continued around me, Vanessa pulled me aside, her medical expertise lending urgency to her words. "Eleanor, I've been reviewing the implant control systems with the FBI's technical team. If Nathan genuinely modified these devices to deliver harmful stimulation, the patients would show preliminary symptoms before full effects manifest. Increased heart rate, mild seizure activity, neurological disruptions." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, already sensing where she was heading. "I need to get to Rainier Medical Center," she said firmly. "If I can access the patient monitoring systems there, I might be able to detect early warning signs and intervene medically before any permanent damage occurs." Harrington, overhearing this, looked skeptical. "Dr. Morgan, we can't risk Nathan detecting your presence at the hospital. If he has the surveillance capabilities he's demonstrated so far." "With all due respect, Agent Harrington," Vanessa interrupted, her professional confidence evident, "this is what I'm trained for. There are 27 patients, including 8 children, potentially at risk. I can work with the hospital's existing medical staff to establish monitoring protocols without raising alarms. I could see the strategic value in having Vanessa positioned at the hospital while I engaged with Nathan. It created a second layer of protection for the patients while potentially yielding additional insights into the implant system. She should go, I said. Nathan's focus will be entirely on me and the facility where Caroline is located. The hospital is the last place he'll be monitoring. Harrington considered this, then nodded sharply. We'll arrange transportation and a cover story for Dr. Morgan's presence at Rainier. But absolute discretion is essential. As the FBI team prepared both operations, my meeting with Nathan and Vanessa's deployment to the hospital, I felt a strange sense of alignment with Vanessa. Despite the circumstances that had connected us, we were now united by a common purpose: stopping Nathan from causing further harm. Be careful, Vanessa said as we prepared to part ways. Nathan doesn't respond well to feeling cornered. You, too, I replied, genuine concern in my voice for the woman who had appeared on my doorstep just hours earlier. Those patients need your expertise. As I prepared to depart for the meeting with Nathan, Harrington's team completed the placement of the nano-trackers, invisible particles embedded in my clothing, and a specially designed clear adhesive applied to my skin that would be undetectable to normal scanning. Remember, Harrington instructed one final time, your primary objective is to confirm Caroline's location and condition while keeping Nathan engaged long enough for us to secure the implant. Control system, do not attempt to apprehend him yourself under any circumstances. I nodded, understanding the parameters of the mission while recognizing that nothing about this situation was predictable or controlled. In less than 12 hours, my entire understanding of my life and marriage had been upended. Now I was about to meet the secret sister my husband had never mentioned during 17 years together. The taxi arrived, and with a final reassuring nod to Harrington and her team, I stepped into it, giving the driver the address in Bellevue. As we pulled away, I glanced at my watch. 20 minutes to reach Caroline, and perhaps to finally understand the truth at the heart of Nathan's deception. Lakeview Retreat emerged from manicured grounds like a vision from another era, a sprawling Victorian mansion converted into a private care facility, its elegant architecture belying its modern medical purpose. As the taxi approached the circular driveway, I spotted the discreet security measures installed throughout the property. Cameras disguised as decorative elements, motion sensors camouflaged among landscaping, and uniformed staff whose watchful posture suggested training beyond basic patient care. The facility perfectly matched Nathan's exacting standards: exclusive, private, and meticulously controlled. I paid the taxi driver and approached the main entrance, where a security guard in a suit that failed to completely conceal his tactical harness stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted me without being told my name. "You're expected. Please, follow me." Rather than leading me through the main entrance, he guided me to a side door that opened onto a private elevator. "Dr. Blackwood is waiting for you on the 3rd floor. You'll be scanned before proceeding." The elevator ascended silently, opening into a small anteroom where a female security officer waited with a handheld scanning device. "Arms out, please," I complied, knowing Nathan would have insisted on thorough screening. The scanner passed over my clothing, lingering briefly near the nano-trackers but ultimately registering nothing suspicious. The FBI's technology had worked as promised. "She's clear," the woman announced, stepping aside as a door opened to reveal Nathan waiting in a corridor beyond. He looked different than he had on the video call, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, a shadow of stubble on his jaw, and a tension in his posture that I recognized as physical and emotional exhaustion. Despite everything, some deeply ingrained part of me briefly wanted to reach out to him, to ease the burden he carried. I suppressed the impulse, reminding myself of the 27 lives still at risk. "Eleanor," he acknowledged with a nod. "You're punctual, as always." "Some habits survive even the collapse of a marriage," I replied evenly. Where is Caroline? Nathan studied me for a moment, perhaps searching for signs of deception or FBI coaching. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. This way. He led me. Down a corridor of private rooms, each door marked only with a number rather than a patient name. The hallway was eerily quiet, staffed by nurses who nodded respectfully to Nathan as we passed. Not just a patient's family member, I realized. Nathan was known and respected here, possibly involved in the facility's management. We stopped before a door marked 317. Nathan's hand hesitated on the handle, the first genuine uncertainty I'd seen from him in years. "Before we go in," he said quietly, "you should know that Caroline's condition is complex. External signs of awareness are minimal, but her neural activity suggests much more is happening internally. That disconnect is what my research aims to bridge." He pushed open the door, revealing a sunlit room that looked more like an elegant private bedroom than a medical facility. Advanced medical equipment had been integrated discreetly into the decor, monitoring systems disguised within wooden cabinets, EV stands crafted to resemble decorative floor lamps. And in the center, in a specialized bed positioned to face floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington, lay a woman in her late 30s. Caroline Blackwood's resemblance to her brother was striking. The same defined features, the same dark hair now threaded with premature silver. Her eyes were open but unfocused, gazing at nothing. "I come here every Sunday," Nathan said softly. "Read to her from the scientific journals. Update her on my research progress. 17 years of Sundays, Eleanor. While you thought I was at the hospital catching up on paperwork." I approached Caroline's bedside, taking in the sophisticated monitoring equipment, the personalized environment Nathan had created for her. Family photos decorated her nightstand, pictures of Caroline and Nathan as children, their parents, moments from a life interrupted decades ago. Why hide her from me? I asked the question that had been haunting me since discovering her existence. Why keep this secret? Nathan moved to his sister's side, adjusting her blanket with a gentle familiarity that revealed years of practiced care. At first, it was compartmentalization. My life had two distinct spheres: professional success and Caroline's care. I saw no reason to merge them. And later? He met my gaze directly. Later, I recognized that you would disapprove of my research methods, even understanding their purpose. You've always had rigid ethical boundaries, Eleanor. Admirable in a financial analyst, limited in medical research with profound human stakes. There was truth in his assessment, which made it sting all the more. I would have objected to data, manipulation, and patient endangerment, regardless of the motivation. We both knew it. You never gave me the chance to understand, I said quietly. You made that decision for both of us. Yes, he acknowledged without apology. I did. I moved closer to Caroline, studying her peaceful expression. The neural implant. Technology. You developed it specifically for her condition? Nathan nodded. The official research follows FDA protocols, but the true breakthrough work happens outside those constraints. Caroline received the first prototype implant 3 years ago. This revelation stunned me. She's been part of your experimental treatment for 3 years? Without oversight? With the only oversight that matters, he corrected sharply. Mine. Her neural activity has improved by 28%. Subtle external responses have begun to manifest. Changes in respiration when I speak, pupil dilation in response to specific stimuli. I process this information, understanding more fully the depths of Nathan's obsession. The children in your trial, do they have similar conditions? Similar neural damage patterns, yes. The most recent adjustments to the treatment protocol have shown remarkable promise. 2 patients who had been unresponsive for years have begun tracking movement with their eyes. His voice took on a familiar intensity, the passion that had once drawn me to him. We're on the verge of a breakthrough, Eleanor. That's what makes the timing of this interruption so devastating. In my ear, Harrington's voice was steady. Keep him talking. Technical team reports 60% access to the implant control system. Need more time. I moved to the windows, considering my approach. What about Vanessa? How does she fit into all this? Nathan's expression tightened. Dr. Morgan was brought onto the research team for her expertise in neuropsychological assessment. Her involvement became personal, which was not my intention. And the pregnancy? An unfortunate complication, he said dismissively. One that became truly problematic when she began questioning the methodology. Her emotional attachment to the pediatric patients clouded her scientific judgment. The clinical detachment with which he dismissed both his unborn child and Vanessa's legitimate ethical concerns crystallized something for me. Nathan's moral compass had been irreparably damaged by his singular focus on saving Caroline. Everything and everyone else had become instrumental, evaluated solely on their utility to his ultimate goal. The countdown timer, Nathan, I said, turning back to face him. You know I can't leave here without resolving that situation. His expression hardened. The situation resolves when the FBI withdraws their investigation and allows my research to continue. People could die. People are already dying, Eleanor, he countered, gesturing to his sister. Caroline has been dying by inches for 23 years. The children in my trial are dying the same way. My research offers their only hope. I needed to redirect him, to find the leverage point that might break through his rationalization. You're a doctor, Nathan. You took an oath to do no harm. Sometimes harm is necessary for the greater good. No, I interrupted firmly. That's where you've lost your way. The moment you decided that some lives were acceptable collateral damage, you stopped being a healer and became something else entirely. In my ear, Harrington updated me. Technical team has achieved 80% access. Need approximately 5 more minutes for full control of the system. I needed to keep Nathan engaged without escalating the situation. Looking around Caroline's room, I noticed something I'd missed before. A journal on her nightstand, its pages filled with Nathan's handwriting. Daily updates on his research, personal reflections, communications directed to his silent sister. May I? I asked, gesturing toward the journal. Nathan hesitated, then nodded curtly. It won't change anything. I opened the journal, finding entries spanning years. The most recent pages revealed something unexpected. Nathan's increasing doubts about his methods, ethical questions he apparently felt comfortable expressing only to his unconscious sister. The line between innovation and recklessness grows thinner each day. I read aloud from an entry dated just 2 weeks earlier. I find myself wondering what you would say, Caroline, about the choices I've made. Would you approve of the methods if you knew the goal? Or would you, like Mother, insist that how we achieve matters as much as what we achieve? Nathan's expression flickered with genuine emotion, perhaps embarrassment at having these private thoughts exposed, or recognition of his own documented doubts. You know what you're doing is wrong, I said softly, even if you believe in the ultimate goal. Moral ambiguity is the price of progress, he replied, but his conviction sounded hollow even to my ears. Is it worth becoming someone Caroline wouldn't recognize? Someone your parents would be ashamed of? The question landed like a physical blow. Nathan turned away, moving to his sister's side and taking her unresponsive hand in his. For a long moment he was silent, and I wondered if I'd pushed too far. She was driving, he finally said, his voice barely audible. When the accident happened, 16 years old, newly licensed, our parents died instantly. She survived, but like this. He gestured to her motionless form. My research isn't just about saving her, Eleanor. It's about absolution. Giving her life back so she can forgive herself. The revelation cast everything in a new light. Nathan's obsession wasn't just about saving his sister, but about undoing a tragedy for which he felt she carried an unbearable burden. In my ear, Harrington's voice was urgent. "We have full access to the system. Standing by for your signal to terminate the countdown." I approached Nathan cautiously. "The patients in your trial don't deserve to suffer because of what happened to Caroline. The children, the families who trusted you, they aren't instruments of your sister's redemption." His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "Without my research, they have no hope at all." "There are other ways," I insisted. "Legitimate research pathways that don't require falsified data or endangering lives. Your work is groundbreaking, Nathan. It could continue under proper oversight, with transparent protocols. By the time regulatory approval processes run their course, many of these patients will have lost their window for recovery," he argued, but I could hear his resolve weakening. "Then we find a better way. Reform the process, don't circumvent it at the cost of your integrity." I gestured to Caroline. "Do you really think this is what she would want? Her recovery at the expense of others' suffering?" Nathan was silent for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression as he looked at his sister's face. Finally, he straightened, drawing a deep breath. "The implants were never designed to be lethal," he admitted. "The threat was calculated to create leverage, a bluff I hoped would force cooperation." Relief washed through me, though I maintained my composure. "End it, Nathan. Disable the countdown. Let's find a better path forward, one that honors Caroline's life without compromising yours." After another long moment, Nathan nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "My phone has a secure connection to the lab system. I can terminate the protocol remotely." As Nathan reached for his phone, Harrington's voice came through my earpiece. "We've already disabled the countdown system. All patients are secure. FBI teams are in position throughout the facility." I watched as Nathan entered a series of commands on his phone, believing he was stopping a threat that had already been neutralized. His expression showed genuine relief when the screen confirmed the termination command had been received. "It's done," he said quietly. "The patients are safe." I nodded, understanding that this moment of voluntary surrender, even if partly orchestrated, might be significant for whatever legal proceedings followed. "What happens now is up to you, Nathan. You can resist and risk everything, or cooperate, and potentially salvage something meaningful from your research. You know me well enough to know I don't surrender easily," he said, a shadow of his former confidence returning. "I know you well enough to know that Caroline would want you to do the right thing," I countered. "Even now, even after everything." The door to the room opened and Agent Harrington entered, followed by 2 tactical agents. "Dr. Nathan Blackwood, you're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and making terrorist threats. You have the right to remain silent." Nathan's eyes remained locked with mine as Harrington recited his rights. No resistance, no attempt to escape. Just quiet resignation as he was handcuffed and led from the room. Before crossing the threshold, he paused, looking back at his sister one last time. "Take care of her, Eleanor. Whatever happens to me, she shouldn't be alone." It was the most genuine request he'd made in our entire marriage, not calculated, not manipulative, just raw concern for the sister he'd devoted his life to saving. "I will," I promised, and meant it. After Nathan was escorted away, I remained with Caroline, studying the woman whose existence had shaped my marriage in ways I'd never understood. I picked up Nathan's journal, reading entries that chronicled years of devotion alongside ethical compromise, the slow erosion of principles in service of a desperate goal. My phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "Patients all stable. No evidence of adverse effects from implants. Coming to Lakeview now." An hour later, Vanessa joined me in Caroline's room, her medical expertise allowing her to review the extensive charts and monitoring data Nathan had maintained. "His core research is legitimate," she concluded after examining everything. "Flawed," in methodology and ethics, but the fundamental approach shows promise. With proper oversight and ethical constraints, this work could continue. I looked at Caroline's peaceful face, thinking of all the others like her, trapped in bodies that no longer responded to their will. Could you oversee that kind of research program? Continue the work without the shortcuts and falsification? Vanessa considered this carefully. With an ethics committee providing genuine oversight, institutional transparency requirements, and proper patient consent processes, yes. The foundations are sound, even if Nathan's methods weren't. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I stood in a federal courtroom as Nathan's sentencing concluded. He had ultimately pled guilty to reduced charges, his cooperation ensuring that his research data would be preserved and ethically repurposed, rather than discarded entirely. The judge's sentence recognized both the severity of his crimes and the mitigating circumstances. 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of participating remotely in appropriately supervised research initiatives after serving a minimum of 5 years. Vanessa sat beside me in the courtroom, her pregnancy now visible beneath her professional attire. After the hearing, we walked together to the car that would take us to Lakeview Retreat for our weekly visit with Caroline. The Research Oversight Committee approved the modified protocol, Vanessa informed me as we drove. Caroline will be eligible for the new treatment program next month. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. In the aftermath of Nathan's arrest, I had become Caroline's legal guardian, accepting responsibility for the sister-in-law I'd never known existed during my marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the woman I now visited every Sunday had been such a profound secret throughout my relationship with Nathan. "Do you ever regret it?" Vanessa asked quietly as we neared the facility. "Knocking on my door that night, I mean. Coming to me for help when you discovered what Nathan was doing." I looked at her in confusion. "You knocked on my door, Vanessa. Bruised and terrified, seeking protection from Nathan after he threatened you?" She stared at me, equally bewildered. "No, Eleanor. You contacted me after finding Nathan's research. Discrepancies. You asked me to meet you at your house to discuss what you'd found." We sat in stunned silence, the realization dawning simultaneously. Nathan had manipulated us both, engineering a meeting he knew would lead to his exposure, but on his terms according to his timetable. "The video message," I said slowly. "The USB drive he left for me. He wanted to be caught, but only after, securing his research and ensuring Caroline's care would continue. The ultimate contingency plan," Vanessa agreed, shaking her head in reluctant admiration. "Setting us against each other, then bringing us together to ensure his work would continue even if he couldn't." As we arrived at Lakeview Retreat, the familiar Victorian mansion welcoming us with its elegant facade, I reflected on how thoroughly Nathan had orchestrated even his own downfall. The mistress and the wife, now united as unlikely allies in continuing the work that had consumed him while correcting the ethical compromises he'd been willing to make. Caroline's room was bright with autumn sunlight when we entered. The latest neural monitoring equipment, installed as part of the new, ethically approved research program Vanessa now directed, showed encouraging patterns of activity. I took Caroline's hand, continuing the tradition Nathan had begun of reading to her, from medical journals and research updates. Vanessa reviewed her latest scans, making notes for the treatment team. "There's definitely increased response to auditory stimuli," Vanessa noted, studying the readouts. "The foundations of Nathan's work were sound, even if his methods weren't." I looked at Caroline's face, so similar to her brother's, yet somehow more peaceful. "He thought the ends justifies the means, that saving her was worth any cost." "And you?" Vanessa asked. "What do you believe now, after everything?" I considered the question carefully, thinking of the 17 years of my marriage, the discoveries that had shattered it, and the unexpected purpose I'd found in its aftermath. "I believe that how we help matters as much as how we help," I said finally. Caroline deserves to wake up to a world where her brother's brilliance saved lives ethically, not one where his crimes overshadow his contributions. Vanessa nodded, resting her hand briefly on her growing abdomen. Then that's the world we'll build. For Caroline, for the patients in the program, and for this little one too. As the autumn light cast long shadows through the room, I realized that the story that had begun with a desperate knock on my door had transformed into something neither Nathan nor I could have anticipated, a partnership of unlikely allies united by a common purpose, working to salvage hope from the wreckage of deception. Caroline's monitors beeped softly, registering a subtle change in neural activity as I continued reading. A small response, perhaps coincidental, but meaningful in a journey measured in incremental victories. Some might call it justice, others redemption. For me, it was simply the truth finally emerging from the shadows of secrets too long kept, and the beginning of something new from the ashes of what had been lost. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.